come and showcase what Nicolay Fear does at the middle school level. The middle school level has been part of all 8 years, and the amount of growth that I've had that they've taught me is incredible. You're going to hear from Caitlin Norton and Joyce Esteman. They have been part of Nicolay Fear since they were in 6th grade. They have mentored this year, so how students mentored them at the middle school level, they have now given back. And that's one of the unique things about our program is high school kids coming back into the middle school settings, giving back and teaching those skill sets that are so important. We are a student-driven team. We take a 6 through 8 approach. So it's not like we want to teach these kids just 6 through 8 curriculum and then off they go. Like we look at the whole big picture. And even after they graduate, like what are they doing? What are we doing to ensure that they are successful even when they leave Nicolay High School? So Kayla Joyce will speak about that, and then we will have the middle school team talk about their experiences, present not only their project, but their robot, and then I'll kind of fill in any missing pieces at the very end, but there they are.
All right, hi there. I'm Caitlin Norton. I'm a current high school senior over at Nicolay High School. I have my notes down here just to make sure I touch up on everything that I was kind of thinking of going through. So I was involved with the FLL program from 6th through 8th grade, and it was just such an amazing experience that I decided to continue throughout high school. I definitely joined in middle school with FLL because of not only Mr. Slagia's recommendation, like, hey, there's this really cool project or opportunity, but also because my friends were joining and it just sounded very fun. And I stayed because not only was all that true, but also because I was able to see how researching and really delving into real world problems and figuring out real world solutions I could do even as a 6th grader, as a 7th grader, 8th grader, and now even as a high school senior. So in the high school robotics program, it's called Nicolay Fear, which is not meant to be scary. It stands for the Future Engineers of American Robotics. But the program definitely builds more than just future engineers. It's anyone you really want to be. I don't plan on going into robotics. I'm not going to be an engineer, but the things that I've learned and continue to apply throughout, not only in the program, but throughout my life, are all really important life skills. So on Fear, I work a lot on the business side. So I help with sponsorship. I help run events. We have like a robot reveal event happening tomorrow, which I have had the opportunity to work with, to help plan and to execute tomorrow, which is amazing. So to tie into that, because Fear runs like a business, we make sure to get a lot of funding and a lot of sponsorship. So FLL, the program, is made possible because of Fear's fundraising and support that we receive. Middle schoolers only have to pay the fee through the rec department. There's no additional funding needed by the middle schoolers because it's all funded through Nicolay Fear, which is, I think, pretty amazing. I didn't even know that because thankfully my dad paid the fee for me when I was going through it as a middle school student. So it's just amazing. Nicolay Fear has an average goal of fundraising $50,000, and even throughout the pandemic, we managed to raise about $90,000. And this helped make not only FLL programs and other STEM things happen, but also STEM events. We've gone out into the community. We've gone throughout the middle school, such as with, if you guys have heard about it, we have our STEM Day initiatives. So there's many opportunities, and thankfully I've got to experience a lot of them, and it's been amazing and fun. Another thing that I've been able to do is helping a lot with designing. So even with this shirt I'm wearing or this button, everything is student made and student designed. I learned how to use Adobe Illustrator, which was very intriguing, definitely a learning process because I was getting confused a lot of the time, but it's just been overall an amazing experience for me. And I'm very happy that I was able to mentor the younger generation and kind of going through what I went through. The experience I've had these past 7 years is truly something that I don't think that I would have gotten anywhere else, and will definitely be applicable not only during my current life, but also my future career and the future life opportunities that I'll have. And I'll pass it off to Joyce now. Thank you so much.
Okay, hi, my name is Joyce. I also have some notes. So for me, I'm just going to talk a little bit more about the FLL side of things. So Similar to Caitlin, because Mr. Savage and I joined FLL in 6th grade, and it's been a huge part of my life. It's been an irreplaceable experience, specifically because of my high school mentors. They were more than just people there to guide you and teach you about STEM, but they were really like friends. And the way that I connected with them, I knew that going into high school, that's something that I really wanted to do. So I was on the high school field team for 2 years, but I realized that my interests really lay with mentoring children, reaching out to my community and learning more how to be a leader in my community. So being part of FLL, learning how to speak, how to guide people, and specifically how to connect with such an amazing group of students has definitely been like one of the best experiences in high school, if not the best. And for FEAR, FLL is such a huge part of the FEAR program. It started in 2013 with just 1 school and 2 teams. And at the height of our program in 2019, it grew to 6 school districts with 7 different teams. So the ability to help over 200 students so far in our program, especially being one of those 200 students, it's something that basically every child should have access to, the ability to learn that STEM is accessible to anyone. It can be fun for anyone. For example, I never thought I would be able to code. I got my coding certificate this summer, which is insane. And like the ability to be able to challenge myself to want to go into a career in STEM, I never would have been in this place without FLO. So basically, it's just such an important program that we should definitely advocate for throughout our community. And I'm just so grateful to, once again, have worked with such an amazing group. And yeah, I just hope that they continue on, whether they want to continue on through FEAR or continue mentoring in FLO. Whatever they choose to do, the skills we learn in communication and critical thinking will follow you, like Caitlin said, wherever you go. So, thank you.
Hi, my name is Layla, and I'm gonna talk a bit about the project and research we did this season. I've been a part of FLL for 3 years since 6th grade, and this year our project was on roundabouts and if trying to create a safer intersection for our Nicolay students, because we have siblings who go to Nicolay, we're about to go to Nicolay. We also just want to have a safe and effective environment to go to school in. And we've learned a lot about how to do good research and how to talk to people and go find answers for ourselves, which I think is a really good thing to know for no matter what you're gonna go into in life. How to research and how to find answers. We got to interview a lot of important people like Mayor Kennedy and a civil engineer for our city, Mr. Amir, and we also got a lot of help from our mentors who have been very helpful throughout the entire process to record people leaving from a certain intersection at the end of the day, so that way we could get the information we needed to complete our project, which was very helpful for us. But yeah, we've learned a lot about researching, which has helped me a lot in doing some school projects that require a lot of research. And yeah, it's been a really good experience to help with life in general.
Hi, I'm Lauren. I'm just gonna talk about the overall experience that I had. It was, like Lila said, a lot of fun learning, researching, hanging out with my friends, learning about general high school things and things I can use in my future, even if I didn't become a STEM major. It was really nice because I knew all of these people before. So working with them was awesome. We had an amazing time. We learned a lot of things from printmaking to modeling, which you're gonna hear more about later, which made me really feel ready for high school. Just being in the whole high school environment made me feel so sure that I was ready to move up and on from middle school.
Hi, my name is Juliana Franklin. I'm in 8th grade, and this is my first year in this FLL program. And as Lauren was saying before, this experience is just so phenomenal. It's been so much fun. And in this experience in FLL, we get to go through competitions. And in competitions, you do a lot of stuff. One of them is to present to judges using a poster board. For example, we have one right here. And we use our poster board, and then we also have our models, which I will be talking to you about. So in presentations, we need to have a model representing what the issues that we need to have. For example, we decided to tackle on road safety, and our solution was to come up with roundabouts. So to come up with that first, I'll show you the mode of the cars that we used. So as you can see here, it is weird looking. It is super duper weird. Okay, there's like all this blue rubbery stuff. I don't know what's that for. Just kidding, I do. And that is to make this car. And to make this car, you need these two rubbers because by using resin, we combine these two plastic rubbers together, and that's what we make to form our cars. For example, we use green resin, and we decided to paint white on the windows and black for the tires. Another example of a car we have is our pink one. Super fabulous, I know. And then for our roundabouts, we decided to 3D print 2 roundabouts using a program called SolidWorks. And so we decided to print 2 roundabouts. So one is the 4-way roundabout usual. And then we decided to also have a 3-way roundabout because we also tackled with 2 roads that we wanted to help fix. And I believe it is Bender Road and Jean Nicolay and Green Tree. And so one of them consists of a 3-way roundabout, the other consists of a 4-way roundabout that we think of. So by using all of this information and by modeling all of this, 3D printing everything, not only do we get to learn so much by just coding and using our robots, but learning how to model, it's just been an experience. You can learn how to mold cars, you can 3D print. So not only like FLL just teach you how to like code and use robots, but it can teach you to do other things that can be really helpful in successful careers.
Hi, I'm Zoe. I don't know how to start after that. All of that awesomeness. I'm Zoe. I've been in FLL since 5th grade, which is like 4 years now. I was on the team when it was like first originated. I helped make the logo and stuff. So that's pretty cool. I have been working with the robot since then, and we've come really far. This is Bert, our child. We love Bert here. Bartholomew. He, she, they, it. I don't know. We have attachments for it, which they literally just drop off. We call them modular attachments. We can drop them off and simple. We have color sensors on the bottom of it, which detect different color ways, like black and white. Here's the attachment, like that. It goes on like this. If it wants to go on, hold up. Yep, there we go. It's lovely. Yeah, so Bert.
So one of the things is, as Juliana said, there's 4 parts of competition. There's the core values, which talks about like what FIRST is all about, right? Discovery, innovation, having fun. The second part is the project, which is what they explained about. We were looking at putting in roundabouts and what that would entail. Third part is actually the robot, which you just heard about. The fourth part is actually the robot game. So every year they come out with a game. We have to build a field. Again, similar to the high school, like a lot of this kind of matches up from middle school to high school. We use a Lego field to play on for the middle school program. At the high school level, we actually have to build a game field, 2x4s, plywood, whatnot, for that. We use the Lego EV3 brick, which is like their dry base. Again, you just saw an attachment. That attachment is called a game mech. Similar to the high school team, we have to actually make our dry base. Like there's no kit, like we actually make it, we cut it and bend it and attach our motors to it. And then we have to come up with our game mech. So the concepts are very similar. It's just one's built with Legos, one's aluminum and whatnot. So if you want to come in the back, they can show you how this robot runs. It's all coded. There's no remote control. They got to figure out with the color sensors how to navigate the board and.
Hello.
No clue on that.
Hi, I'm Lily, also an 8th grader. I used to go here, but I no longer do. I'm at Mapledale now, but I have, FLL has given me the experience to continue being in contact with all of my friends and has helped me a lot with the transition because I still get to talk to my old friends and while I'm trying to make new ones. So anyway, that's about me. It's about Bart. So our robot we coded missions into it. And we start with this mission right here. Okay. And we have all of them saved onto the box so that we can just press and go so that we don't have to deal with the cords and computer and whatnot. It's a big slowdown. So,
So again, there's points for connecting the truck and then this blue box, they're able to successfully get them off the board. There's parts in here that they have to load up on. And then they can put this back on the game board in one of the missions to get more points.
yeah, we don't have the attachment to that one.
That's it.
But yeah, that was our truck mission, double mission. If you get, the reason why we put 2 missions in the same run is because it's more time efficient. And so it's just, we're on a clock up in the field, and so it's 2 minutes. Right?
2 minutes and 30 seconds
2
to
minutes and 30
accomplish
seconds.
as much as they can.
Okay,
I think our highest is 300.
325.
350.
350.
Which is
That was pretty good, decent.
Yeah.
It was good for the time. Right. Did I turn it off?
Did you turn-
No, okay, we're good.
Did it? I did it. Let's give him a minute. He's having a little bit of a. He's having a moment.
I don't.
You're
know.
better than us.
He's a little bit
No,
rusty. We won't judge.
We have not ran it since December, by the way.
Yeah,
They're
this is,
kind of
it's
like, hey,
been
we
3
should
months.
pull this out.
Give him a second.
He's a little bit.
He's trying his best here. Yeah. That's
So-
We're gonna
You're
not
doing
do
great.
this.
So Juliana can explain the motors and how the attachments work.
Okay, so using robotics, you get to touch everything. Touching everything is just awesome. Hands-on activities have been amazing. Right? And to explain some of the motors that we use, we call this a big motor. And basically it helps drive our robot around. And then this is our middle motor, a medium motor, and it circles around in a circular motion, which we use for our gear mech. This one, this big boy, and it helps move our gears, which helps us actually just do our missions in general. And then this is also our linear actuator, which we use to, for example, push the roads down. And we use this, the robot uses this sort of I don't know, like a sort of a rubbery thing. And it helps us move forward and back. Linear actuator. And so it goes back and forth to, push the roads down. But we also use it to push, for example, this crane, so that, for example, you move it out of the way.
And you might want to move back.
Give them one more second.
Yeah,
One more
sorry,
second.
we
Just
had
restart
to do the whole
They
restarting
just
thing.
restarted this.
Yeah, maybe the old guy.
There's cracks in every.
Pretty old.
Yeah.
You can say that.
Yeah, that's a thing we're working on is, we noticed while we were having competition that compared to some of the other teams, our robots are pretty old, because we had them for about 8 years, right? Yeah,
4 or
about
5.
4 or 5. Point is they're a bit out of date, and so one thing we were trying to do during our season was to fundraise for new robot, even though most of it, because we're all 8th graders, we wouldn't be doing FLL next year, but this will future generations of teams to have good up-to-date robots to give them the best chances.
All right, they have it.
All right.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the moment you've been waiting for.
Yeah, no, it's all the
Let's
ones
go,
that
Bert.
love- Yeah.
Go.
Yeah. I'm pressing a button.
So instead of attaching the windmill on its side, if we touch the holding part, we get partial points for that. So again, it's just learning like how to play the game and how to maximize your points.
See
Yeah.
the efficiency right there. Yeah, it's just taking something on and off. It's a lot of time.
I just need to see like more credit to them giving themselves. They did move on to the sectional competition and they were nominated for a robot award. And so just the way that they've been able to problem solve and they fix a problem with their robot every single week. They've learned so many new things, have more skills than I do for sure. And so it's just been amazing just to see how they've critical thinking.
So this is the one, this was like our favorite one because we've had to make multiple iterations. Sometimes it works, sometimes.
We had a lot of problems in the beginning with our line sensor that we use for this mission. We spent like 2 weeks on it, and so that's perseverance and showing us problem solving for us getting it done. But it's up and running. Sometimes we have to do minor tweaks because of the different boards and the lighting and all that. So one that gives us a little bit of trouble sometimes.
But it's gonna work here.
Yeah, it's gonna work.
It did better. If it doesn't, well, do it again.
Yeah, no, that was
the wrong one.
That was the
Okay.
wrong mission.
We're doing great here.
Sorry.
Everybody.
And we always know it works if it connects to that line. We're like, okay, we're safe.
It made the turn. It worked.
So they're gonna knock the bridge down.
One. And, you know, that's.
It does.
That's
stable
it,
right now.
but
Normally that's not that
We
unstable.
just set up this board like an hour ago.
the final one, they're gonna park this.
Yeah.
So they're gonna show you how to park the robot.
We're gonna ignore that.
Get the follow line sensor. And then across, there's like a blue line.
Yeah,
And
that's the one.
we're good. Well, again, thank you for having us.
Thank you.
So much. Any questions?
How did you get all the parts you needed?
Well, the FLL program, already had it there, and they had paid for all of it, and, so it's a big help with that.
Good
Good
question.
You want to take one?
My question is, what can the board do to keep on supporting activities like this particular, but other things? What,
So one thing I will give kudos to our board is this. Caitlin mentioned this, we technically have connected with 6 different school districts. Because of COVID, we kind of, had to get smaller just because our numbers. But normally it's Bayside, Mapledale, and Glen Hills. we used to think Whitefish Bay, we've helped get Whitefish Bay established as far as the team goes. So now they have, or they had 2 teams as of last time we've been in contact. So we help them get established. Again, the point is to get these kids from these 2 other middle schools to come in to be part of something. What we do that's different compared to Mapledale and Bayside is our board provides 2 teacher salaries. So we can have adults there, which is huge. Because if I didn't have 2 teachers from Glen Hills help me with this, I really would lose my mind. It's a ton of work. And they can tell you the amount of hours that they put in after school. Like we go from 4:30 to 6. 3 days a week. And yeah, and beyond. And the high schoolers can tell you that they're like, oh, it's a lot of work. Like when they get to high school level, it even ramps up even more. So we're very appreciative that we have those 2 salaries to keep this going. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Fantastic. We're not.
Yeah, right.
I know, we burned it down.
No, you're okay. Like you guys in my head. Like you make your. Yeah, that's good. Thank you. Oh, that helps. Okay.
And as soon as she did it, I looked at you and you. I'm so proud of you.
I know. You're light years ahead of where I was.
I'm jealous. I'm always
We'll give them a moment to clean up. I hear you. Okay, I think we can get the ball rolling again, and we're on to item number 3, discussion A, or 2021 audit report. I will.
So we have Mike Dema, he's a partner from our auditing firm, formerly known as Howden Schumacher, and we switched over the name to Schumacher Dema. So he's just gonna go over the audit that I did for the 2021.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Mike?
Sorry about that. I don't think I can use my video. I guess I don't really have to. However, is it possible to share my screen so I can show the report I'm looking at?
You're muted, so you can't do it.
He's not.
No, Lindsay is.
Yeah, to unmute them, yes.
Are you able to hear me? Okay, can you hear me right now?
I think you.
As soon as you screen share, I can. Oh my God, I was doing love compliments like that. But she did
No, I
say
just
that.
needed to get out of this, but not as soon as the school shared, I think that's what they did.
It is.
Because I can be there.
But she really said that you were brilliant. And I just didn't say. I read her mind. No. Speak more, but. That's why I don't call it.
Are you able to hear me?
Try talking again. So are there external credits?
No, like I saw, and if I can find like types that I know.
I mean, I can do it.
Can you hear me at all?
We can hear you.
Right, it's just on the wall, so.
That sound.
What is it, March?
Well, we didn't know, they my voice was kind of like.
Are you guys in the meeting or not?
Are you guys seeing feedback right now?
Maybe next.
I did on my iPad. I don't know what happened. Oh, because of that.
somebody
Well, that's one issue.
get out of it.
Yeah, I'm gonna get out of it. That's weird. Meeting, how's it gonna be? It did. It's not in anymore.
Is anybody else
But I muted anyway. So.
All right, thanks. Go just around.
All right, hopefully this will work. Okay, sorry about that, everyone. So I think you can see my screen. Still feedback happening.
Any agenda item.
All right, can we pin him? No, let's see if he can talk. And do more. And then, okay, yes. And then do pin. So then he should be able to come on now. Can we get rid of that? And then we just need the sound going to. Or do you want to call him?
I'm muted.
Oh, yay! Sorry.
It's okay. I know you've had some technical difficulties, no problem.
We can hear you though, it's very exciting.
No, I'd have been happy to do it via my cell phone, but if the Zoom audio is working, that's even better. So everybody hears me just fine?
Yep, it's perfect.
Okay.
Can you
Oh, this
share
is
your
great
screen?
because I know you also have about 25, 26 people attending via Zoom, and I know they were struggling to hear Mike during his audit report. So good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Perry Hibner. I'm kind of glad that my camera's off for tonight because, well, actually, I'm really dressed up. I am actually. So, but, oh, here I am. So, but I am the lead survey strategist for the Donovan Group. As Allison and her team know, I also worked for the previous decade as the director of communications for a district in Dane County. So it was our pleasure to work with Glendale-River Hills on 2 surveys. I know your board agenda talks about that I'm going to discuss the communication survey tonight, and I definitely will. But I would also like to spend a couple of minutes with the first survey we did, which it was the ESSER 3 proposed plan survey. So I'm going to share my screen here. Hopefully we won't run into any issues. Is everybody seeing the slideshow? So again, this is also available in the board packet. But again, I'll go through these first 2 slides pretty quickly. So again, I just want to remind you, like when you see surveys a lot of times by, when they presidential elections, things like that, you'll see a plus or minus margin. We don't do that with these because we would have to, you have to identify certain target audiences in order to make that work. So again, this survey we opened in late December and we closed it December 12th. And it was an effort by the district to learn more about what their stakeholder groups were thinking in terms of how to best use those elementary and secondary emergency relief funds, particularly the ESSER 3 funds. We had a total of 316 complete the survey. The bullet point I'd really like to bring your attention to is the last one. So what I did is I broke it down into various groups. All responses, so all 316 are provided in black, and you'll see them in the next couple of slides. Results for caregiver and parents and extended family members were done in red, and staff responses are in green. In an ideal survey, you'll see similarities across all those groups. And that was certainly a case with the ESSER 3 plan survey. When we talk about the communication survey, you will see some differences though, and that's why it's kind of important to know which group is represented by which color. So again, I will remind you that 75% of the people, and that was about 240 of that total, were parents and caregivers. And you actually had about 60 staff members take the survey, which was a very good representation of your entire staff across the buildings. So as we look at this, you'll notice that 90% of all participants, nearly 89% of that second group, and 96% of your staff strongly agree or agree with the statement that the Glendale-River Hill School District needs to continue to focus on COVID-19 prevention and mitigation strategies aligned with the Centers for Disease and Control's guidance. Now, the next two slides that I'm going to show and are the 10 different options we gave people in terms of ranking. So if I thought the social, emotional, and mental health supports for students was the most important, I would give it a 10. If I thought it was the least important, I would give it a 1. So the higher score one of these has, it means that it received more 7, 8s, 9s, and 10s. So as you look at this, you can see that across all three groups, that social, emotional, and mental health supports for students was the highest one. And that those next two ones finished second and third, depending on which groups you were looking at. So addressing identified learning loss or mitigation and prevention of COVID-19 transmission. The other one still scored really high up until, I would say, probably you get to 9 and 10. And as I was talking with Allison and her team this week, one of the things that'll be so important about this survey that we did is that as they go forward and determine how they want to use those funds, again, you can look at these responses and say, we'd like to allocate more dollars in certain areas because they received higher scores among all of our groups, or we're going to put less dollars, less emphasis on maybe a couple of them because they were quite a bit lower in terms of their rankings. And then finally, we close with 2 open-ended questions. We try not to put a lot of open-ended questions in surveys, but one of the things we wanted to do was find out basically if there are other funding priorities. And you can see that, out of those 300 and some people that we received, about 25% of them provided us with responses. And you can see that they talked about things like curriculum, more help for staff, maybe additional staff, especially in the areas of social workers and reading specialists, and even potentially financial support for staff. Again, I know how challenging that can be because, again, ESSER funds weren't meant to be used for operations. But again, whether it's, but that was a fourth area that people brought up. And then the other question, slightly different, but again, what should the district consider in responding to the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on students? Again, similar number, 84 responses. Some of the areas the categories we thought that they fell into were providing after-school tutoring, identifying ways to support families whose children are in quarantine, providing additional support again for staff so they can collaborate and find quiet time, an extended school year option, maybe before school programs, and then support to help students catch up after a year with little or no in-person learning. So that was the results from the first survey. And then I'm not going to go full screen on this one, but because I've got some notes that I really want to make sure I cover on the communications one. We offered the communication survey district-wide, so not only to staff, not only to district families, but also to community members from January 10th through January 23rd. And we had nearly 400 responses. Again, I'll take you to those last 2 bullet points. As I start going through the next few slides, all responses are in black. I'll also note, because 243 of the 396 responses came from parents who have children in the district, we didn't separate those because so much of their responses are going to be reflected in the results in the all responses that are, again, in black. Staff responses are in green, and we had 44 staff members complete the survey. And then the other thing we find very useful with surveys like this, and also surveys that have to do with potential referendums, is providing the results from a comparison group. And first of all, let me explain who those people are. They are district residents who are not current parents of preschool or school-age children, nor are they employees, nor are they students. And so when I show these slides, their results will be in red. So the first thing, and as we talked on Monday with Allison and her team, one of the things you'll notice here is the response can be quite different depending on the group we're talking about. So for example, when you talk about your staff and then all responses, which again tends to be predominantly your families, look at the numbers for district email, which obviously is a great way to communicate with those two groups. On the other hand, though, and it makes sense, the folks who don't have children in your schools or aren't affiliated with your schools, but live in the community, email doesn't work because in large part, you don't have all their email addresses. So look at that second one though. And one of the things we talked about, so when I was the director at Middleton Cross Plains, we did 2 newsletters a year that we mailed to every household, more than 17,000 in our district. And we made the focus mainly information that we thought our families who didn't have children in our schools and didn't work in our schools, what they would want to hear and read about. And again, this survey shows that certainly district mailings will be very useful, beneficial to that audience. So with things like a district newsletter. These were more other things that, again, we put a lot of different ways that that people get their information from the district. And again, you'll notice that, like, for example, your staff gets more than 1 out of 4 staff members is actually watching or reading the minutes from your school board meetings. So again, a great way, to maybe involve them more or making them aware of the meeting. So again, maybe you can raise that percentage some. And then finally, these last categories, again, tends to be small. It's interesting that your comparison group, nearly 25% still rely on the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. And again, I always found that in our neck of the woods, it's the Wisconsin State Journal. Whatever we could get something in that newspaper, again, our larger audience at that 17,000 households, they tended to notice that more than maybe they did our local newspaper or some of the things that we did to try to communicate them. So again, my final analysis point is email was the clear #1 selection for all respondents and staff, although it ranked tied for 6th among the comparison group. It should be noticed that the comparison group's top 2 ways to get information about the district are district mailings and district newsletters. Now, the next question, and again, this is really telling about the work your district is doing, is on a scale of 0 to 10, how likely would you be to recommend the district to a friend, colleague, or family member? And a couple of things I'll point out. Districts that are struggling tend to get 0s, 1s, 2s, 3s, and 4s. If you add up those 4 areas for the Glendale-River Hills District, it's less than 2% would give a score of 4 or less. Meanwhile, approximately 70% of respondents rated the district a 7 or higher, which for our firm, we say if you're getting a 7 or higher, you're doing great work. And again, I'll point out that nearly 20%, so nearly 1 in 5 people who took this survey gave you a perfect 10. Okay, that's really impressive. So I'm jumping now to question 14. I didn't want to go through every question in the report. I wanted to go through the ones that I thought would be most interest to the school board members, and then also to the people who are in the audience tonight. So what are the ways you like to receive your information from the Glendale-River Hills School District? And again, people could select multiple options. So there are 3 slides related to this. What I will point out is urgent updates and district news was a clear #1 for the types of information staff and all respondents would like to receive. The top 10 selections received nearly 48% or more before there was a clear drop off, and that was at community and parent workshops. The comparison group would like to learn more about district goals and strategic planning updates, Board of Education agendas and minutes, and school district budget information, in addition to urgent updates and district news. So going back to that those earlier sets of slides where I talked about the way that different groups like to receive their news from the district, if you think about the fact that the comparison group really appreciates district mailings and district newsletters, that's when you do those things, that's where I would focus on those district goals and strategic updates, Board of Education information, and school district budget information. Because again, that's where they're getting the information. That's where they're most likely to get it. All right, on what type of devices do you access the internet at home? Now, Allison and her team wanted us to ask this question because there was some concern that, again, first of all, that you may have students who and community members and families who aren't able to access the internet. And what we found out is that is not an issue. But again, smartphones were overwhelmingly #1 for the comparison group and all respondents, and were also used by nearly 89% of your staff, while laptop computers also scored high with all 3 groups. Lack of internet access does not appear to be an issue. One thing I guess I would point out as a communications guy is, again, I was on your website before the meeting. I was looking at the rest of the agenda. I really spent some time with your calendar because I used to put the calendars together for our district. And so a lot of your families are probably accessing your website by their smartphone. I hope that your website actually looks differently on a smartphone, and I didn't call it up tonight on my smartphone, versus when they're doing it on a laptop or a tablet. Because again, anything we can do to make the device they're using, easier for them to kind of find information, the better off we're going to be. Question 17, again, asks how parents and caregivers and other community members how they'd like to provide feedback on a variety of matters. And again, email and surveys ranked in the top 2 for all respondents, staff, and the comparison group. But there are other ways that people would like to also reach out, which is virtual meetings, a contact form on the district website, meet and greets, and the Board of Education meetings. They also receive favorable response rates for ways to provide input and feedback. So again, as you're thinking about how you want to engage those stakeholders, these are all ways that they want to engage with you, that they want to inform you about their opinions. These last few questions really speak to what you're doing there. Again, before I even talk about the next 3 slides, I want to point out that we've worked with probably 20 to 30 districts a year in terms of communication type surveys, in Wisconsin, that is. And there are very, very few. I can count, not even on one hand, probably 2 fingers, how many score as high as you did. So these numbers are really good. I just wanted to open with that before I go into these specifically. So more than 80% of all respondents and more than 86% of your staff are satisfied with the quality of information they are receiving from the district. The percentage is slightly lower among the comparison group, but at 79.8, that's still very high, very, very high. So question 19, which is, I'm satisfied with the timeliness of the information. The numbers didn't change much here. You've got more than 82% of all respondents and more than 88% of staff are satisfied, because they're in those top 2 categories, with the timeliness. And it's nearly 78% of the comparison group that agrees or strongly agrees with that statement. Those are great numbers. I feel welcome in the district. Now, I'll point out that, again, 77% of all respondents, 98% of staff agree with that statement. Only 60% of the comparison group agrees, but it's important to note that 30% didn't have an opinion. I get asked often, could you make an educated guess on how they feel? I think the safe thing to probably say is split that number 15-15 and say that number might be as high as 75-76% among that comparison group. I also think, however, this is a great opportunity to try to change that from no opinion to being in the agree and strongly agree category next year, just by doing more of those things with the type of tools you have, as I mentioned before. And then finally, I feel that my opinion matters about the Glendale-River Hills School District. And here would be another real opportunity for the district to engage stakeholders so that they can raise those numbers in 2023. So as you see, 56% among all respondents, 57% among staff, for just under 42% among the comparison group. However, those numbers aren't that low because, again, look at the no opinion again. Again, if you split the difference, you're talking now your all respondents number jumps up to about over 70, your staff number's over 70, and your comparison group is probably right around 60%. But again, real opportunity for growth next year. And then overall, I'm satisfied with the Glendale-River Hills School District. Solid numbers, 80 in the all respondents group, 86% in the staff, 79% nearly in the comparison group. This is a very high level of satisfaction. You should be very pleased with these results. And with that, I'll stop sharing my screen and I'll see if there's any questions.
I have two very quick questions. One is, for some of these questions, I'm wondering what the characteristics are of the people who answer something or not. Like, I feel welcome, right? My question is, what's the makeup of the people who don't feel welcome? Do we have any indication of why?
So we kept the surveys anonymous. What we do know is, again, there were a couple of demographic questions, but again, we don't necessarily, I mean, so I can filter that for Allison and her team to find out, again, on the percentages of the people who weren't felt welcome, if it's higher in one group than another. But there's going to be some limitations to that, just because we didn't ask a lot of real specific demographic questions. So I hope that helps a little bit with the answer there, but I can certainly filter that for Allison and get it to her.
Thank you. And then I guess the other question I have is next steps. We have the survey, we have the information. What do we do to use it, or how do we use it?
So my recommendation actually will be how we used it in Middleton Cross Plains when I was the communications director there. So for one thing, we made sure that we shared the results of the survey with the stakeholders who were impacted by it. Because again, we wanted them to know that, we knew the results and we wanted to share them accordingly. We also then told what our kind of our action steps were going to be. These were the things that we want to pat ourselves on the back on because we did really well. But these are the things we learned from the survey, and this is what we're going to do to try to improve going forward. So in terms of, action steps for Glendale-River Hills, again, I would encourage you to look at those numbers are really good. But like I said, with those last couple of ones, I think there are opportunities because of the number of no opinions you had there to certainly look at opportunities to try to use your tools to decrease those number of no opinions next year. And with the ESSER 3 plan stuff, I think that's pretty straightforward. The federal government required that districts do some sort of engagement to find out what their stakeholders think in terms of how the funds should be used. Well, now you know what your stakeholders think in terms of where they'd like to see the dollars allocated. Now it's just a question of working on that.
One of the things too, Andy, is that through the communications committee, so this was like one of our steps in a timeline to create a communications plan. So then we'll bring all this information back to the committee and start talking about creating an action plan, aligning it to the strategic plan. So that'll go to the committee too.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Harry.
You bet, Allison. Thank you for the time, everybody. I hope you found it useful. Thanks.
Thank you.
I can share this because there's not sound. Okay, that sounds good. So you can like go off of the. Yep. I'll just try to click with you.
And then when they speak though, then you're gonna have to share your screen again.
Oh, so should we just leave it? Do you have Anna's? I don't, I do have Anna. Well, Anna's was on, I don't have it downloaded, I don't think. Yeah, you just stay hooked up and I'll do. If I can just do.
Want me to just cast?
Yeah, she'll just have to do this. You'll have to disconnect. Either one of us, yeah. You cast or I cast, she's have to disconnect. Yeah, so you have to disconnect from the
You
like,
want me
stop
to
airplay.
Cast web or, yeah.
Yeah, you can do it.
Mr. Savagen walked out.
Okay. All right, well, item number 3C, one vote schedule committee update. Committee update.
Oh, I put comics on and now I feel like I got fixed in my. Look at that. I'm showing up with my cookies.
We're getting quicker every time.
All right, so I wanted an opportunity to let the board know some of the thoughts that we've been working through with our Glen Hills Scheduling Committee, which is comprised of a group of teachers who have volunteered to join this committee. We have representation from Allied Arts and from our grade level teams as well, so that we can begin to start to think about how we might be able to better service our students. So we do have our teacher committee, so all grade levels, special education is represented, music, physical education, and allied arts. In addition to that, we conducted a student survey, so we got some input from our scholars as well as input from our families. All right, and I will turn it over to Ms. Cornitz to talk a little bit about time.
And so one thing we were looking at is the amount of time that our middle school students, so grade 6, 7, and 8 have in ELA and math compared to the other feeder districts that go to Nicolay. And so the other districts have an average 14,400 minutes or 240 hours, it's the same thing. Where Glen Hills, the middle school students have 9,000 minutes or 150 hours, which is a difference of 5,400 minutes in a year or 90 hours in a year. And so that was something that we really wanted to address with the schedule.
In addition to that, we also did kind of look at a comparable of schedules. So really outside, within the whole North Shore region, Brown Deer, Mequon as well, and Whitefish Bay, the only district that I saw that was on a traditional block schedule like we have is Shorewood at this point. All right, so really wanting to take into account some of our priorities and really listening to what teachers, students, and families have to say about what matters in terms of learning and education at Glen Hills. So initially, in talking with our staff, I'll let Mr. Savajan kind of take over.
We're looking at increasing our math and our ELA time for two reasons. One, we have to get our students ready for high school. Like that's like our #1 priority. Two, we have to match what our high school is doing. They have 90-minute block schedule. Like we have to build that stamina of them being in the classroom and them understanding that content for that duration of time. So that's on top of our list. We want to also have more time for that reteaching. I understand something. We have time within that day to go back to reteach that skill that needs to be taught. So kids aren't going home saying, I don't know how to do this. This allows us that time to do the reteaching. Physical fitness, you know, the tech eds, the arts, like those are important to kids. Kids come down. It's kind of like their break for the day where they're not in a desk and they don't have someone lecturing to them. It's hands-on. They're able to explore. They're able to, you know, use those critical thinking skills in a different kind of way. And then just looking at our school-wide emotional learning.
All right, so the priorities of our families. So when we looked at our families' priorities, I sort of went through the survey and looked at where they fell in terms of ranking, in terms of importance to our families, and that's how they're listed here. So really looking at world language classes were an important component that families were interested in making sure that their students all had access to. Increased academic support in both math and reading, having continued access to music, PE, and allied arts coursework. And then we also asked a question regarding sort of what they would like to see in terms of those courses that are offered within the music program. And we did have 80% of our respondents would like to see a theater or world music or African drumming added as a performing arts option. So something in addition to music, band, orchestra, or choir, having another option that would be available to them. And about 94% would like to see a STEAM, which science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics, or a financial literacy course offered as part of an allied arts option. And now let Michelle talk about our scholar priorities.
So number 1 is gym class. Ask a kid what their favorite subject is, and they'll get gym well out of the time. But what really, really makes me happy is they really see the value of academic support in math and reading. Music and world language comes in 3rd, allied arts. 63% would like to see theater or music, drumming, so not quite as many as parents, but still a significant number of students. 77% like to see STEAM, financial literacy, as an allied art. So kind of aligned with the parents. So a lot of it, like what to expect.
Right. What speaks volumes to me, I think, to kind of echo Michelle too, is to really this idea that our students recognize the need for additional support, right? So they're looking for that support to happen within their school day. So really what we'd be looking at for Glen Hills is a modified block, which is not like it's not a true block. So there would be periods. And so really what that means is that we would maintain an A-day, B-day schedule for our PE allied arts as well as for science and for social studies. And so we would each day have a 75, somewhere between 75 and 90-minute academic block of math and ELA, and that would happen every day for our scholars. The 75-minute to 90-minute AB block of science and social studies would maintain the same amount of time that we're spending on social studies and science right now, but it would allow there to be a longer block of time, which could facilitate labs and different projects that students are working on without it being so rushed. We'd be looking at a 35 to 45-minute music class, world language, and enrichment and resource class. And music, world language, and enrichment and resource would have to take place every day. We need that time in order to be able to articulate to Nicolay around our world language. If we're not having students into their instruments every day and practicing, the idea that they're going to grow as musicians is hard. And enrichment and resource would be the time that we would fill in an opportunity for students to participate in some opportunities to enrich their learning, also to support specially designed instruction within special education, as well as supporting students with some reteaching if they need additional support with homework and lessons. And then we would be looking at a 35 to 45-minute A-day, B-day physical education and allied arts rotation, which is very similar to what we're looking at now in our current schedule. So in order to kind of do our due diligence and learn more about block scheduling, I met with the principal of the middle school in Grafton, and he shared some ideas that they had. So I wanted to include some examples of some of the things that we're seeing in some of our neighboring and local areas of schools that are approximately our size or a little bit smaller than us. So what they do is they end up kind of creating a system of choices for kids. So as their scholars move up, they begin to have different choices. So as sixth graders, because they're a 6-8 building, their students start with just 3 choices in their trimester rotation, and then music electives. Once they start to be able to select language, 2 of their choices can become occupied with language, and then they are kind of up here with fewer choices. And then that increases again in their 8th grade year. So there are options to think about. Do we, and these are questions that we've talked about as a committee, is are there advantages to having students narrow their focus towards the end of their middle school years because they're engaging in something that brings them joy, that helps drive their interest and their engagement, but there's also something to be said for exposure. So that's a conversation that, as we kind of look at some potential schedules, we might need to delve into a little bit more and get more feedback from our stakeholders on. This is kind of how that looks in a school. Is students would start out their day in a block, then they would have, this is a modified block, so you'd have a skinny period, and then you would have a longer block, and then time for your lunches with some skinny periods along it. So it breaks up the day a little bit for scholars, so they're not sitting for 90-minute block, 90-minute block, 90-minute block. There are times in which they can move, which is a little bit more adaptable for a middle school learner. And this is Fox Point Bayside sample modified block. So again, you're seeing a lot of the same thing, this mixing of longer periods and shorter periods to really make sure that you're spending some key amount of time on math and literacy, because both Bridges, our math curriculum, as well as Readers Writers Workshop and ELA require that amount of time to do due diligence around the curriculum. And right now, if you were to talk to any of our teachers, they would tell you it is very difficult to implement what they're supposed to be implementing in their curriculum and the amount of time that they have. And again, another sample from Mapledale Indian Hill, which is very similar. All right, and I'll let Michelle kind of talk a little bit about our student numbers.
And so when I first looked at this, I got a little bit confused. I was thinking, so this current section for 6th grade would translate to 7th grade next year. No, what we're looking at is next year's 6th graders. We have 90 of them. This is how they're distributed this year. This year they're in 4 sections with about 22, 23 kids in the class. And so this just kind of helps us to know what our numbers are, what our current distribution is, what our class sizes would look like, or what they currently are for our numbers that we have.
Right. So as we're looking at a modified block schedule mathematically, we need to have sections of 4 or 6, sections of 5 do not work, right? And so what we have at Parkway are sections of 5, they filter into sections of 4 here at Glen Hills. And then we bump back up to 5 as we start running kids through periods and kind of move them away from more of a block schedule in grades 4 and 5. So what you would see, and I think one of the areas to pay attention to is the fact that our group of 4th graders coming in next year, we have kind of a bigger group coming in, right? And so moving them into 4 sections, as you can see, you know, starts to kind of bump up some of our class sizes a little bit. So our proposed draft of just kind of what a typical day would look like is every day students would have a block of math, a block of ELA. They would have on their A days, they might have social studies, physical education, they would go to their world language class, their music, and then enrichment. And on their B days, they would have math, ELA, they would go to science, they would have their allied arts class, they would go to world language, and then music and support and enrichment. And you can see for grades 4 and 5, we would build in additional ELA time because they even need a longer amount of time with reading and writing as they're still working through those foundational skills. So one of the things that the team really wanted to spend some time working through, we worked through a SWOT analysis to look at what are our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats in terms of looking at making a shift in scheduling. And I will let Mr. Savajan kind of jump in, and both him and Ms. Cornish were a part of that conversation.
So we looked at it like, what are our strengths? Well, we want to increase obviously that time of math and ELA. We want to match that scheduling of where our scholars are going. They're going to Nicolay High School, they have that block schedule, like I said earlier. Again, it's matching that up, matching what 4th and 5th do, the framework of our instruction. When we work at like those relationships. Again, this allows us more flexibility, obviously, with scheduling, with planning, and also more time for those interventions. Again, we don't want to send students home saying, I don't know how to do this or that. Like, we want to be able to hit that on that day, and that allows us to do it. Some of the weaknesses, obviously, the intervention, like finding time for the intervention for both students, but if you like struggle with math and reading, like finding that time for both. Restructuring, so the opportunities. We are looking at restructuring how our special ed looks. More inclusive, more kids in our classrooms. Again, what does the framework look like? The other thing that I really like about this is the fewer transitions. For me personally, if this was a wish list, which it's not, but like 90 minutes for me, because that's less cleanup. So like fewer transitions, once I get kids in my classroom, like I know I have them for 90 minutes, we can do great work. But this will give us that start of like for ELA and math, like we have them in their seats, we have them listening, we have their attention, and we're able to dig deeper into the curriculum. And then having more choices, especially as far as 7th and 8th graders, giving them more choices. What are their interests? Again, if your interest is STEM, your interest is STEM. If your interest is art, if your interest is music, financial literacy, like what are your interests? Let's tap them in. So when they go to high school, but again, more electives are being open there. We can send them to high school. Hey, maybe I'm interested in this. They go through it their freshman, sophomore year, and they're like, oh, I'm not really interested in this. Like, perfect, because now you're not going to college spending X amount of dollars. You already know, no, this isn't really the road I want to go. I want to go this road.
I can talk a little bit about threats. So some potential threats is looking at special education. So time with our current structure, just really thinking about like the complexity of being able to deliver all of the minutes within the IEP. And so there are obviously opportunities, but it would require us to do some restructuring around how we deliver special education services. Right now, we currently have teachers that operate at grade levels, and if you have 90-minute blocks operating at the same time, it makes it really challenging for a teacher to be in 2 places at once, right? So thinking about how that delivery and service model looks. Obviously, if we were to move to a model of limiting choices for students, that can help them focus, but it also limits exposure, like I've said before. And there is that potential to increase class size within that one bubble year, right? So the other thing is what has come up here a lot is this instructional framework. So with the block schedule, And I'm sure anyone who's taught at the high school could think about this. We know best practice is not lecturing to students, and we know for a fact that I can tell you that no middle school student is gonna sit down and listen to an adult for 90 minutes ever. So what needs to happen with that is that instructional framework needs to be laid out very clearly, and it needs to be consistent across the building. Number one, to be able to help support this idea that we enter into a classroom, there may be some beginning activities, there may be movement breaks that need to be built in to fit the developmental needs of kids at this age. And then also the opportunity to do some independent practice, to come back together as a whole group, to be able to reflect, and then to be able to give some support and help within that block. So it's going to be really important that that instructional framework, really when talking with the teachers, that is the area of the biggest area of professional development need that they see, but it also creates a really good opportunity to refine and grow teacher practice, and to really think about how we can deliver a very a responsive way of doing that with students. So staff were asked to talk a little bit about some of their non-negotiables, like what are things that we absolutely have to have, right? And so math and ELA felt like they have to meet every day. They need time for the curriculum that they teach. They need time for Alex practice in the classroom so they can help support that. And they need inclusive supports for special education and gifted students to happen within that time frame. Science and social studies, they need equivalent time for the curriculum that they teach now, so we can't take time from them because that would make their work really difficult. And time for labs, particularly in science. World language, again, being able to meet every day to continue that practice and to be using that language. PE and health said 45-minute classes because they got to get kids changed and move them into a pool sometimes for some units. An equivalent time for their curriculum. Music also felt like the ability to give weekly group lessons, but then also to have opportunities for full rehearsals with their band, orchestra, or choir groups. And also allied arts to 45 minutes or more for complex projects in grades 6 through 8. And transition time for project resetting, as Mr. Sabajan referred to, and for Ms. Malcolm too. Like if I'm doing a project with 4th graders, I might be using clay with my 8th graders. I got to flip my room, right? So I need that time in between. And then support and enrichment was really student access without missing preferred classes. So we really want to create an opportunity or time within the schedule to help support students without them having to give up something else. And then a support structure for reteaching, because that is a really important component when students don't understand something the first time. So timeline for scheduling is really trying to look at, kind of, we're building models to support priorities. Our scheduling committee is refining some pieces, really looking at being able to look at some of those particular recommendations, and then start to think about finalizing a schedule and identifying professional needs and next steps. In May, making sure that our students have an opportunity to do some course selections and really draft that learning plan and get teacher input on scheduling, especially around special education and GT services. Finalizing the professional learning over the summer, and then program students and refine their schedules. And that's something that happens later in the summer when I'm here and working with our secretaries to really make sure we have balanced classes. And then we would begin to implement that professional learning and teaching around teaching students in a block in August. And hopefully the idea would be that we would implement and continue that professional development as well as monitor and evaluate. And then also really begin to start to think about how we revisit this process and refine any pieces of the schedule for the following year. So that's sort of the timeline and looking at that. That is what I have for you.
I have a question. In looking at the timeline, it looks like the beginning of the professional development to teach in a block begins in August. I know from personal experience that you need more than just a few days before the school year starts. So what is your plan to address teachers who need more professional development? Because the 4 days, they're trying to get their classrooms ready and take care of other things. So is there going to be a more robust, longer period of professional development for teachers who are going to be teaching the block?
I think, I would agree with you that yes, there needs to be a more robust training in order for that to happen and really a strong amount of clarity and modeling around that professional learning framework. So yes, those typical 4 days at the beginning of the year that are like rushed and hurried, we need to be very intentional about setting the framework for that time and looking at some other opportunities in the summer to help support that and to get some lead people on that to start working through that. The other piece of that is that I think we need to really walk through like our professional learning as we walk through the beginning months of September and October, need to be constantly recycling back to that. Like we can't move on to other things until we have those pieces down. I would say that this would be the main focus of our professional learning in these early months of the year and has to be something that keeps being revisited if we're going to refine it. It can't be a one and done. It has to be constant.
Right, so then do you have, for the teachers who will be identified, and I'm assuming that some are already identified as the teachers for this for next year, would they be able to have opportunity this year to visit schools that successfully implement ELA and math in a block at a middle school similar to our demographic? So they can at least get a jump ahead on what best practice looks like in another school before they start learning about it in August?
I think that is a wonderful opportunity. I know Grafton has offered that we can come out and visit, similar size range. I don't know if they represent our demographics specifically. Also, I'm sure that any of our partner districts that are working in this block would be more than happy to accommodate us to do some visits.
And then, the last question I have is, I know that there will be coaching in regards to instruction, but having adolescents or pre-adolescents in a block schedule, and I'm certain the curriculum has it broken down to sizable chunks of information, but there's that behavior management piece that our curriculum does not.
Yep.
So will there be specific coaches assigned for behavior management and instructional, or how will that look next year in this?
I think one of the key pieces is looking at that instructional framework and really pulling through from some best practices around, looking at some of the lead work around the Teach for the Champion and looking at some of those high yield strategies as being non-negotiables that are a part of that instructional framework to really help support teachers, because then those also become easy to model. So when I talk about a consistent framework, it would be like, there should be a way in which I feel like Mr. Williams and I would be able to walk through the school and I see a strong start in every classroom and it looks fairly similar, and I should see certain components of the block throughout the day. I also feel like that would tighten up on management. One of the things that I see right now within the school atmosphere is one classroom is run so differently than another that there's like almost culture shock for students. And so setting culture and expectation at Glen Hills is going to be very contingent on tightening up that framework. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, it does.
Yep. Yep.
Thank you.
Yes.
I'm having mental blocks, but no pun intended. I just feel like we go through this every couple of years with changing the schedule. I don't know. I just feel like we just came back from a similar thing to this. And it was the B's D's, and this is going to be able to help. Then we switched it. No, this is what we're gonna really need for our kids, and now we're switching it. So I'm just trying to understand, why are we changing it? We change it every couple of years, and I'm not right. I think didn't we have something similar to this
We did.
a couple of years ago?
Yeah, not the 90-minute block.
Okay, maybe not that exact, but it.
Then I thought when I was teaching, it was like, I taught for 70 minutes or something like that. Math.
There were some changes in schedule, so at one point, there were some classes that were longer. but
Yeah,
it
that's
wasn't
it.
a block- It wasn't a block schedule per se, this is.
Yeah, but I had a longer class in social studies.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did do that for a while.
I guess just the purpose of this is, I trust you guys, but it also is everything that are changing, even on this whole agenda. It's been tried before, and it was one way one time, and now it was the absolute worst thing you could possibly do, and we have to change it. And now we're going back to it again. So it's not that I just want to know, why do we keep changing it?
That's a great question. It's a great question. I think it's a really pertinent question. And I would say like the biggest piece to me is that like, no one schedule is ever perfect. There's always ins and outs.
And I get that,
right?
exactly.
Like that's what it is. I would say you've experienced multiple changes in schedule because you've had multiple changes in leadership, right? And so people come in with new ideas, right? And this is what it is. And I want to say that, like, I'm not here to drum up or sell like an idea. What I want to think about is this. Like, if you're thinking about instructional time, how is it possible when you look at a 90-hour deficit of learning in a particular content area, which is crucial, right?
Oh,
It's
and
crucial,
I
right?
understand that, but
That's,
this is,
that to me, this is why, right? This is why. Because if I'm sending our scholars to a school to sit in classes with other scholars who have had that much more instruction than them, how do I expect them to even be able to hold water in that environment without providing them that?
and I understand that, but then I'm gonna still go back
Yeah.
to the reason that we did it before is because we did not have, like, I remember at some point, we didn't have enough math, and then we didn't have enough language, and then our kids wasn't getting enough social, like, emotional needs stuff going on, and then we had to break something out. I just feel sorry for the kids who are like in first grade, second grade, and they've had 3 or 4 different ways to learn. That as they go through the eighth grade.
Right.
I understand that. I see why we're doing it. It's not that I'm disagreeing or
Yeah,
anything like
yeah.
that. I just want to know. So next time when you come to change it in 2 years, I'm going to bring this up
Please
if I'm
do.
here
Please
and
do.
say,
Yeah.
you know, this is
Yeah.
what you said the last time.
Yeah.
So I'm just always gonna make sure that we're trying to do the best and you have a good reason for this.
Yeah.
In 2 years, if we change it, I want to hear that good reason again of this is where we've looked at it. We're tweaking it now, or no, we gotta go back. I just always want to look at that to make sure that we're doing the best. This obvious, I can understand, but
They were an hour, 5 minutes.
So when I go back into this as well, if you start to think about the fact that our students from kindergarten through 5th grade learn in a block. They learn in a block schedule. I mean, that's how their day is structured. And then 6, 7, and 8, they don't. And then they're gonna go to high school and they do again, right? So there is also that part of it in terms of continuity and like going back to what Mr. Savajan said about stamina. You know, that idea that, and that you can learn like that, right? And that you can be in those spaces. Plus, I would say that there's been a shift in education to look at more integrated studies. And you can't go deep and integrate things in the 50 minutes, like you're trying to run through what you need to teach, right? So I do think there's a lot of advantages to it. I think there's a lot of opportunity to give our kids a higher quality learning experience. Yep.
Okay, bear with me because I'm trying to formulate this question I thought, but it's sort of around social, emotional, and mental health. So when you had that SWOT analysis of, so I'm not really hearing sort of what those considerations were around how this proposal will impact that. And so sort of adding on to that question, were any sort of SST members part of this committee or any consulting with our mental health team? And like the first thing that stands out to me is the loss of PE every day when that was like students' top thing. So
They don't have PE every day.
Say it again.
They do not have PE.
They do not have it every day.
They have it every other day.
In the current schedule. Oh, I was just looking.
So they're on an 8-day, B-day rotation, so on A days, they might go to gym, and then B days, they go to art.
Okay, sorry, I was looking at the schedule in the student handbook. So right now they have every other day, so that doesn't change. So
And
then
so-
just back to the original sort of, how does the.
So I
social,
want to,
emotional,
go
mental
back to this, because this wasn't really a strong point of conversation with the staff, is this last point here in terms of integrated school-wide social emotional learning, was the idea that right now, that learning is happening in isolation, and prior to that, it happened when a counselor would go into the space of a teacher, right? So you're limiting what we can do. One of the biggest things that I would say in terms of just talking to teacher teams on some of their struggles is they're trying to get through their curriculum So that moment of coming in and welcoming scholars in and having them sit down and center to be learners is lost because we're pressed for time, right? So one of the things that they talked about is there a way that we, number one, maintain our time for our morning meeting, because that's a huge way of starting the day in a positive space. Our staff talked about, is there a way for us to, in that morning meeting, have some curriculum that either is provided by our school counselor or our school social worker that would help them guide students through that on a daily basis in the morning. And then in addition to that, when we talked about the resource period, one of the things that came up is, as our teachers were talking about how do we brainstorm, are there ways in which, like, you know, once a month we could develop small families where we have all of our adults take some of our scholars to help forge different relationships. Also moving to a team of 6 or 4 creates less, like, I'm not a kid, I'm not gonna move through that many teachers in a day. I'm probably gonna move through 2 to 3 teachers a day outside of my specials classes. So I get deeper relationships because I'm seeing fewer students. So all of those things were a really huge part of the conversation about the needs of our students in terms of their social emotional wellness, in terms of talking about why this is valuable. So, I mean, I can say too, I mean, a conversation I had with the 4th grade team is, we come back and I've got to get to my reading lesson, but my kids are just like, for recess, right? Well, you need that time, like you need time to sit down and get centered to be a learner. And that provides them that time to be able to not feel like it's so rushed, and it creates that space. So there was a lot of talk about how do we actually beef up what we're doing, because social emotional learning in a school-wide setting can't just reside with a counselor. It has to be every one of us on staff being able to talk that language with kids, have common language with kids, and be able to really do that. So there's a lot of, we have Second Step as our curriculum right now. There are things that we could pull for that and distribute to be a part of every morning meeting, right? And so that we could really take a look at how we could better meet kids' needs in that way. Did I miss anything from that conversation that we had?
No.
Okay.
Okay, so I have a couple of questions, and I'm just trying to go through this, and by the way, so this was not in the curriculum committee?
This is the first time we've had
Yes,
this
that's
conversation.
All right, so here are my questions for you. I'm gonna try to rattle through them pretty quickly. First
Okay.
off, who's in the committee?
I'll go back. I have let's see, you guys can help me. We have a fourth grade teacher representation, 5th grade teacher representation, 6th, 7th, and 8th. We also have world language representation, special education representation, our reading specialist, math specialist, allied arts.
Both
music,
Angie and I are both there.
and music, and also PE.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then this is for all of Glen Hills, or the whole, I mean, who is this exactly for? What grades?
What we would be doing is looking at building out a block schedule primarily for our middle school, and what we would do is that try to match some of that up with the block scheduling that is already occurring in grades 4 and
So
5.
this is 6, 7, and 8.
Yep.
I mean, not the building, but 6, 7, 8. Okay. We're still working on the audit results. I mean, kind of tying back a little bit what Danielle was getting at. So, I
Which
mean,
audit, sorry, which audit are you
Yeah.
talking about?
we're the special ed
Special ed,
audit
yeah.
and the talent
Yep.
audit.
Yep.
So how are those, I mean, that's still work in process. So how does this really incorporate any recommendations from there? I'm just curious.
Well, and I think I'm gonna let Jenica speak to the GT piece, because I know that you and I have had that conversation about how it helps us develop those plans while also creating opportunities for all students through the resource period. I'll let you kind of elaborate.
Yeah,
on that.
so as part of our conversations with the consultant with the GT audit, we did a lot of talk around just specific students who qualify for GT and how we can support them within their content areas, then also providing that talent development piece so Lolita can run those classes during the enrichment time. So this scheduling that Anna is talking about, Ms. Young, provides that additional time along with meeting the individualized learning plans of students who qualify for GT. So it kind of gives you both.
And I would just say for special education, working towards inclusive practices,
Yeah.
it supports in the same way. So if you're pulling kids out for on top of, it should be on top of, so they shouldn't be missing core instruction. So there's a time built in now to this proposal that would give them that extra time while allowing special education teachers to go in during that block and run some small groups with the teacher and do some co-teaching. So it supports both audits.
So I saw something about enrichment.
Just want to throw that enrichment block up that you got your schedule, just so you can see what.
So that could be intervention, that could be talent development, that could be special education support.
Is that resource? I mean, in essence.
That would be the same thing as what
Similar.
we have for resource.
Okay, so
So support enrichment.
one thing I didn't see here, I mean, I saw a reference to gifted and talented services, but add to specific STEM stuff, like, we dealt with this great presentation tonight. There's, future city and all those other things that I realize people are calling STEM and STEAM versus gifted and talented. When does that fall into the picture?
Absolutely, it's a great question. So when we look at this support enrichment block, in some of the model schedules that we're kind of toying with right now, this would occur at the same time for grades 6, 7, and 8. So we would have all teacher hands on deck, which would provide students with opportunities. So one of the things that we learned from some of the other districts, what they do is they use a scheduling tool. So if I'm a math teacher, I can say, like, I need Allison and I need Michelle, and they have to come retake a test for me, but I need Jenica and Lindsay can have a choice that day of where they go. And so then they could go into something. Otherwise, when we think about implementing this off the bat, we would probably need a tighter structure. So what we talked about as a teacher team on the committee was really, could we have programs where potentially Lalitha ran one of her programs and students could opt into that for so many weeks, right? And then we have like math reteaching happening. So students who are feeling like they need support can sign up to go to their math teacher for a certain amount of time during that time or a certain day schedule. And then on other days, they would have choices. So it does create an opportunity to really allow some of that flexibility. It is, and I've done it in a different district where you've had during that enrichment block, you've got some kids who are receiving intervention or special education support services, but then there's also an enrichment class where kids are doing project-based learning and other really cool projects. And based on minutes and time and things that we can be flexible with, and having the ability to push in and do some of that work here opens up opportunities for kids down here to do some of that work. So going back to, thinking about like future cities could be a project which Lalitha brings a core group of kids in and meets with them, every other day or every day during that.
And it was just an example.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
but the point is that like today, for example, they'd have to be either pulled out or do lunch. There wasn't really
Yep.
0 hours.
You got it.
So anyone who wants to participate in gifted and talented, or in actually these STEM or team activities, just necessarily gifted and talented, would have that opportunity to do that. With that, I saw a bunch of other options out there, like, which by the way, I just want to tell you, I've been advocating on and on and on about doing something with drama and theater, here.
Right.
And so I was glad to see that that's a
Right.
consideration. But do we run the risk of offering too many different things in a small period of time as potential options? I mean, are they going to be able to meaningfully take care of that?
Yeah, and I would think like in order to start to do this and do it well, you start with the tighter program. Like you look at scheduling kids for a certain amount of time, it's a little bit more structured as we build culture around that. What I can share with you is that in some of the schools that I've talked to that have this common enrichment period, they have teachers who they've indicated they have a teacher who loves Legos. For example, he teaches like a 6-week course on reconstructing history with Legos for kids, right? So like there are also opportunities for teachers to explore some of their passion projects through that. But I would say walking into this next year, I would not look at us being in a space to offer that just yet, right? We need to start to build the structure and culture around how this time period is used in order to get to a place where we could do that. In my previous district in the enrichment period, I had teachers who taught a course for kids on how to be an adult, and they learned how to purchase homes and do different things. So like you can start to kind of use that time to really kind of build some of those components in there. I would say what I would see this looking like next year is really targeting some of our students who need the extra support and help, making sure that they're in those classes first and foremost, so we can help support them, making sure that we have our special education teachers positioned to be able to provide additional on top of supports during that time. And then looking at if we can offer just a few things, potentially even having like music lessons during that time, that those would be the slow builds into what I think could be something that's broader that really expands kids' horizon.
Okay, 2 other very quick ones. One is, if we do this, what does our total instructional time turn into? for math and,
So one of the things that there's going to be some constraints, right? So with everything, you have to look at it. So constraints are going to be around busing, right? So we have to look at like, so what I'm charged with doing right now is building an ideal structure with the time that we have and looking at, is that day feasible? Does it meet our instructional minutes for DPI, which I'm sure it will probably be over, which is fine. And then can we facilitate the busing to support the schedule? And so then what ends up happening is you have to start to make some of those adjustments, right? And that's where I think like ideally we'd be looking at 90 and 45, but we might have to shift to 80 and 40, or you know what I mean? We might have to play with time a little bit within there. So that those are going to be some of the constraints that I think are going to impact some of the instructional minutes.
so it'd be a significant increase.
It would be a significant increase for our kids. Yes.
My other question is, and I don't want to start a philosophical debate right now, there's
Yep.
only a discussion item.
Yep.
But when, you know, there's a tight timeline on this, and
Yes,
I'm
there
just wondering when the board gets something to vote yea or nay on. I mean, there's
Yep.
got to be a proposal.
Yep, so within
right?
within the timeline, the goal would be to have the schedule. So we're playing with additional schedules right now, running a couple of those by staff and hoping to have those approved by the end of March, so that in April we can start to finalize and schedule.
So I'm
and
sorry,
plan.
what month would we have this come before us?
April,
April? Okay, so that'll be on the April agenda then.
beginning of April.
That's what I wanted to.
Special meeting, yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
End of March, beginning of April.
Yeah. Okay. All right, thank you very much. It was very nice. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, before we pass on,
Unless you don't want me to.
No,
No,
go
It
ahead.
seems like the right time to ask.
Go ahead, yep.
Since it's a board together.
Yeah.
I just had a couple questions. I noticed that on your. Oh, Carla Pennington Cross, I'm so sorry. 909 West Acacia Road.
We know it.
Glendale, Wisconsin. The stakeholders list, the
Yeah.
slide, doesn't include any SEL stuff.
It does not, and it was open and it's been, I've offered it as an option at a time when now they're all available to me. But actually, I shouldn't say that, Denise.
Well, there's only two, right?
Ms. Davis was there. Yeah, she was there. Actually, she did come to the last one because I did speak with her and she did come, she was at the last one.
Okay,
I
she's just
apologize.
not listed. on
I
the
did not
slide.
list her, but she was at the last meeting and did have that conversation about some of the possibilities around how we could use morning meeting time. So yes, she was present.
And then the second question that I'm just sitting here, I've always asked this, because, you know, there was a suggestion in something you said that our kids might be going to the high school underprepared because compared to other schools. And I don't know what longitudinal data there is. Is there any data showing that our students do worse at the high school than students from our partner schools? You know, it's just data I've always kind of hunted for and never found. Or is this just something you're worried about? Or is there evidence that our students actually do worse at the high school?
I'll speak to that. There's
Yeah.
pretty significant evidence that most of our students end up in some sort of support class their freshman year in mathematics or reading. So they're not prepared to move forward. And so what that does is, once you start to pull into one of those classes correctly, they're end up taking an elective credit that could be spent somewhere else enriching their education.
So that's the high school letting us
Yes,
know.
yes.
And there's been a conversation around equity and race and bias in testing and all that kind of stuff. I mean, that's what I think about, right? Because we have bias in testing, we have bias in standardized testing. And that's reflective of our community, right? That puts our community at disadvantage just structurally in our systems. And so I just always wonder, like, is that part of the conversation? Are we misidentifying the problem? Is it really instructional hours or is it the demographics of our community?
I think that when you look at the numbers, Carla, and you see that our partner schools, our students in the partner schools are getting 14,000 minutes of math and ELA, and our students in this district are getting 9, that's significant. And that discrepancy is going to show lag wherever our students go. Whether they go to Nicolay, any other school, that's a lag, and that needs to be addressed.
And that's not just 1 year, that's 3 years, that's 6th grade, 7th grade.
Right.
Okay. Karen, you had your hand up. Are there people online?
For future topics.
Okay, great.
You have a lot of work ahead of you. Good
Well,
luck.
Okay, then item 3 COVID update.
So this is. So this is a really quick update because our numbers have been trending in a really positive direction. So one of the things that you guys asked about was staff vaccination, and we did a new survey, including the booster. So the data that we got, we had 104 responses, which is extremely high. 97% of our staff have had 2 doses of either Moderna, Pfizer, or 1 dose of J&J, and of that percentage, then almost 80% had had a booster. And this was a couple weeks ago, so I could actually probably check and see if there's more. So that's promising. I did share with you guys in the private comments or whatever that's called in the board meetings, the information just for you, because it had some obviously identifying information in it, but that way, I know you had asked about breakdown of like what their jobs were, so I provided that for you so that you could see the high numbers of like classroom teachers versus central office staff, so you could just kind of see the breakdown of who's vaccinated. It's such a high number of people vaccinated at 98%, but I still wanted to give you that information so that you could see like which groups. And then case numbers, I'm sure you guys have seen the dashboard. I've actually gotten a little lazy with my communication because I'm not sending the entire letter anymore because we've had so many days with 0 or 1 case. But if the dashboard is still linked on the website, I'll send that out occasionally just to remind families and staff that it's there. So if we look at coming back from January 31st through today, we've had a total of 7 cases at Parkway and a total of 1 case at Glen Hills over the 2.5 weeks. And 2 staff members. So lots of hope. that we're turning it out.
Okay, thank you. All right, any other comments or questions? All right, then going on item 3E, right-way transportation and start time survey.
Okay, this is just a brief update for the public. Essentially, this conversation started back when we changed our start times for this year. And at that time, most will recall the board said, we'd like to keep this as an ongoing conversation, revisit this, and discuss whether this is what's best for our district, our students, et cetera, for the next year. There's a lot more to it, but that's the essence, right? And so the next steps that we plan to take is that we do want to send out a survey. And so policy will be sort of working that survey out with Allison later this month. It'll be a short survey that we want families and staff to, or families and staff to fill out to kind of understand what the impact of start times has been. It will also include some questions about their experiences with Right Way, since during the conversation we had prior, there was talk about all the districts going to RFP. And so we thought that would just be helpful data for us to have as the board considers some of these issues or some of these topics. So then the goal would be for that survey to go out early March, to leave it open for a couple of weeks, have the results mid-March that could then go back to policy, which would also come with sort of administrative recommendations. In the meantime, Ms. Johnson will also be sort of getting updates from our partner districts around RFPs, confirming with Right Way how much time we would have, should we be exploring wanting to change any of the start times.
We were actually able to get that.
Oh, okay.
End of the school year would be ideal, so our timeline.
So our timeline works. And so then the goal would be to have this come to the board in April for a discussion around start times and RFP, the whole thing. So that's the update. That's really it. If you have questions, I guess, or you want to be involved, the survey is the next step, and that will be a policy later this month. Good.
Terrific. Okay. And 3 out, Nicolay Partner Schools.
Also, like I said, every month we meet as partner districts, and then after our meeting, we talk about items to bring to our board for discussion. The first item is around COVID mitigation practices. Conversation at the partner districts was about, and with the health department, really the entire North Shore, it's about when do we start to peel back some of our layers of mitigation. Partner districts talked about, and we all kind of agree that the first thing we would want to look at is the quarantine and potentially moving to a quarantine optional. With the numbers the way they are now, it would almost be a moot point. Oftentimes, like the few cases we've had,
students had symptoms, so they've been homesick. By the time our nurse is calling, a kid might have to stay home for a day. So it's a very limited quarantine. When I talked to our nurse, she said that she thinks it's a great idea. Numbers are low. Any sick kids are staying home. She thinks this would be a healthy step to getting more kids in school and having kids miss less school. She said that any student who's experiencing symptoms obviously would be quarantined until they get a negative test. And this would just be for close school contacts. So if a parent calls and says, like, Uncle Mike was over and he has COVID and they're close contact, we would still be recommending that student quarantine. It's just for our close school contacts. And part of the reason for that is we have not had close contacts go home and then end up positive. So we've got a pretty large a large amount of data now from September until now that shows kids that have quarantined have most likely not ended up being positive. And now that we're down to the 5-day, it's really kind of, so partner districts wanted us to bring this conversation and look at potentially March for going quarantine optional. So obviously more discussion needed. And then the next step is to talk about is obviously face masks, which we know is a very hot topic. And so the thought with the partner districts was, would we want to give it a couple weeks after spring break to see, which would give us a healthy amount of time with the quarantine optional to see how that impacts data and cases, and then look at it after spring break, having a conversation about mask optional. I guess this is kind of the appropriate time. We had 2 public comments emailed to us, and since they're on this topic, I'll just share that we had 2 families that emailed strongly advocating for mask optional. So we got those emails today. I just wanted to mention that too, that those were 2 public comments around that. Mask optional right now is Cedarburg, Germantown, Grafton, unless they get to 6% positivity. Mequon-Thiensville is looking at under a burden rate of 350. Nicolay is in conversations about it. Fox Point, Bayside, Mapledale are in conversations. Northern Ozaki is mask and quarantine optional. Port Washington the same. Shorewood is still having conversations about it, and Whitefish Bay, I believe, just sent out a communication very recently about changing those strategies. So a lot of districts are looking to that. So just starting the conversation around that.
Our policy's been to follow the CDC, and so obviously if we change something and we have to act on it as a board. I don't know what the right thing may be. I mean, I'm really heartened by these numbers dropping down, but I also got to say a lot of that because we wear masks, and if you take away masks, I mean, that's the only mitigation. I should say the only one, but it's the primary one, and so if you make mask optional, you're taking away masks.
Well, kids can still wear masks and staff can still wear masks, but essentially, yes, it's optional.
And I understand. I'm just saying that, you know, I prefer the wait and see approach. I definitely think we ought to have it on our agenda and consider it after a break, like you said. But I just want to point that out, that masks are what help drop these numbers down in addition to the vaccines. Okay.
The other thing we talked about as partner schools was employee handbooks. And we know that we have some work to do. We're gonna have to get a committee together and start working, looking at some of the policies connected to the employee handbook and the employee handbook. And one of the things that we talked about is there a way that we could talk this summer around certain areas of the employee handbook where we could have some consistency so that it's, which would just be helpful so that staff don't feel like, well, in this district, they get X, Y, and Z, in this district, they get, so similar to being competitive and having some consistency. So that was just a real preliminary thought. And then staffing needs. We just, at the meeting, just shared any openings or opportunities to share staff. We unfortunately didn't have any with them, so, but that's just an ongoing piece of the partnership, so. Those are all the pieces from partner schools.
Okay, new business 4A, 2022-2023 staff calendar.
All right, so here we go. So staff calendar, there's 2 pieces. The first piece was parent teacher conferences. Basically, I just did a staff survey. And you guys have the results of the survey in your packets. So the majority of staff were interested in the conferences being in the November dates. We had free-form feedback, which was really helpful because the biggest concern around moving from staff that wanted to keep it in October was how do we communicate with families about progress of students? Like that's too late to communicate to families and to make connections. So basically, we would just have to come up with some sort of a plan. We talked about progress reports at the middle school level, sending those home halfway through. And would we bring back open house or some sort of events so that there'd be that opportunity for families to connect with teachers in September or in October prior to the conferences. The other piece that's really important is 4K. It's just different. They're just kind of a different beast. So working with the K4 team around what works best for them for conferences. So that was the first piece of.
So why are we looking at this? I'm trying to understand this.
So when we changed conferences this spring, it was because there were 2 nights in a row. And so we just did like a quick change to get rid of those 2 back-to-back nights because it was just too much for teachers to have students in between. So then we looked at about 4 different models or options for conferences, and then we brought it down to 2. And so I just put it to staff and just asked them what they preferred. And both of them provide a full day of conferences, nighttime conferences, and then teachers not working the next day. So that there's not that back to back to back.
All I gotta say, please, sometimes kids are lost by November for the whole school.
Yes,
year.
there has to be
And I
communication.
know we
way
always say
before
that we're
that.
gonna try to figure out a way to do it, but
There'll be a solid plan for that. It should happen anyways, even if conferences are, do you know what I'm saying? Like there should be communication always if kids are struggling. Next piece. Okay, so the next piece is obviously the professional development calendar. Lindsay, do you mind? Right, you don't-
yes.
Oh, can you do the options for a family? I didn't know you still. It's in our notes. calendar, so it's not something. It's like in our notes. It's a piece about milestones. So there were 2 things that we were charged with specifically. There's been a lot of other things that we've been looking into between the last board meeting and now, but the 2 things at the end of the last board meeting were around options for families during that time, if we did an early release, and around K4. So Lindsay kind of summarized some of the options for families.
So one option is Milestones, which currently provides after-school care for students at Parkway. And they would be able to provide a childcare for the 2:45 to 5:30, and also the early start time of the 11:45 to 5:30. They weren't able to commit to a cost completely because it can vary so much determining next year and the cost. But right now it would be about $4.45 an hour. And one of the things that we talked about was we did not want finance to be a reason that would be why a family couldn't. So if there's a need, we would be able to help cover that cost as a district. The second option, Ms. Weiss covered in our last meeting when she talked about Nicolay Rec. They had a list of classes that they would be able to offer, and that would range between the cost of $25 and $50. And then the last one, we have
the
a
whole year.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, is that for the whole year? $25 to $50 a class, like they'd offer a class for an early release day or?
No, it would be like 6 weeks or 8 weeks or depending on the class. So that's why there's a range. So if it was like maybe a 4-week class, it might be, you know, like if it was maybe 4 sessions, it might be $25.
Just on the
If it's
early
8
release
sessions, yeah.
Okay.
But that's also something that we look to support if families wanted to do that.
And then the last option was Wisconsin Athletic Club.
And that was because you said something about running around and like movement, so we looked at the left, yeah.
So we have the partnership with them for our employee membership, and they would be willing to come in and offer a lunch and learn for our students. So the first hour would be a healthy lunch and just talking about different topics like stress management, healthy eating. And then the second hour would be an activity, so like a optical course, a Zumba class, whatever we wanted it to design the class to be, and that would be no cost for our family.
Or what does it say about the third hour?
The third hour we would have to cover internally.
With our staff?
Yep.
No, with our costs.
Our costs, like
Oh,
we
we
have
would
to
pay
kind of
for it.
depend on how many kids sign up. So we're actually be able to potentially like help watch for kids, but it depends on the amount because keeping the kids entertained for 3 hours would be.
So they would do 2 hours and the district would have to cover a third
Yeah.
hour of care. Okay.
So that was the first piece. The second piece was K4. So we met with the K4 team a couple times and their recommendations. So I'm just going to kind of share what the 4K team sent to me. They said, thank you, school board, for listening to the teacher's thoughts regarding early release in K4's case, no school for students on those days. Benefits for the K4 students, caregivers, and staff on these days. Looking at progress data and collaborate as a team to support student growth. Currently, specific time is not allotted for this, and we just do it. Plan and prepare for early intervention, as research shows that that's the most powerful impact on learning. Connect and communicate with caregivers. We have double the amount of students. Collaborate and support professional growth with our paraprofessionals. We currently have no time to collaborate as they arrive after we do done teaching and they leave with students. Change over learning centers to correspond with curriculum units. Units and centers change monthly. Curriculum plan with the ECK4 team. Connect cross grade level with K5. Potentially this time could give us an opportunity to collaborate with local daycares in the community around early childhood development. It says, please note, all these important items are currently happening, but often during our own personal time. K4 doesn't have a common planning time between the two teachers and so special ed teacher. We're asking the board to please support this proposal as we believe it would benefit students, caregivers, and staff. So she couldn't make it. She's balancing like 2 households tonight. So she just sent me the K14. So basically, I think you guys know, actually, we only did this in one committee. So, so just running through kind of, I guess, reviewing some of the why. I think it's, as we've talked about, not so much the why, it's the how. That's probably the struggle, but we have to ensure our kids are receiving high leverage, rigorous instruction. So there's a list of things. Obviously, as we talked about that in the last committee meeting, we're not going to do all of these things. That would not make sense. But I wanted to just share part of the work that's been identified. Obviously, we just had a presentation about block scheduling and being able to support that professional development. If the time was granted, we would then, the next step would be to create a specific professional development plan using our strategic plan, our audits, our communications plan. And Jenica and I have talked about that being like a 3 to 5 year plan. We want to make sure our instruction is aligned with standards. We want to make sure that we have time for grade level professional learning communities. There's often a common misconception when we talk about curriculum, that curriculum is the books that the teachers are using to teach, or that it's the resources that the district has purchased. That's not curriculum, that's resources. So we need to not only train teachers on how to use those resources, but we also need to support teachers on making sure that they're teaching to the standards, which is our curriculum. Data informed decision making. So making sure that teachers have the time to sit down, look at their student work, look at their student data, and actually lesson plan in response to that. And they just don't have the time to do that, especially not with their paraprofessionals and special ed teachers. Implementing curriculum fidelity and just continuing the schedule work, like I mentioned at Glen, that was just mentioned today. So lots of big ideas around how that time would be used. It's hard to get really specific without having our strategic plan in place, because we don't want to get back into the rut that many times districts get into, where this looks good, that looks great, we need to give this to teachers, oh, they need that, they need this, and then we're just all over the place and nothing is done well. We need to have a solid plan for professional development in place, and so that teachers know we're gonna ask you to do this, we're gonna support you. That's not gonna just disappear now. This is how it's gonna look in year 2. This is how it's gonna look in year 3, and then we have a solid plan for how we're implementing things. So that's kind of what this piece talks to, sitting down with principals to come up with those plans. Is the current PD plan gonna look the same at Parkway as it is at Glen Hills? Of course not. Might not even look the same in 4th and 5th grade as it does 6th grade. So we have to make sure we're being responsive. We know that there are a million things we want to do. We have to pick those big rocks, which is why we're doing the strategic planning process. Included with that would be a dashboard that would include how are we going to monitor that what we're doing is working. The next slide is about minutes. There's a couple slides about minutes. Some of the feedback was, how does this compare? So our current, we've had 5 extended hours. So we've had some extended hours, which is the 4:15 to 5:15, which is just a challenge to have staff engaged and wanting to learn after a full workday. And then we've had 2 professional development full days, and then 1 is a partner day. So we share that with Nicolay. So that's about 19 hours.
No, sorry, no PD takes place in the summer.
Besides the August days, it's optional.
And the August days are designed to get classrooms ready, is kind of what I was hearing.
There's some kickoff stuff, there's some, yeah. There's some of, like, getting classrooms ready. We did Ready, Set, Go meetings in the past. There's just like some tech stuff, like, here's how you sign up for this, do that, do this training, like access your phones. There's some space for PD, but it's just not a lot of space, and it's those few days before school. As far as PD in the summer in general, or on weekends or anything like that, it just has to be offered as optional because it's an outside of their contracted time. So you're not going to get a consistent, like, as a district, we've identified this as a focus, and now we're all going to consistently get this, have this learning, because it's just going to be optional. So that's what we had now. The original proposal was for every week, trying to lessen, again, looking at families and trying to lessen some of that burden. Looking at 3 hours every other week would still give us a similar amount of professional development time. Hours and minutes, I just went ahead and did the worksheet. So every year we have to do an hours and minutes worksheet. I'm sure you guys have seen these in the past. So the DPI knows that we have the correct amount of hours and minutes. So I took a Glen Hills schedule for next year because 7th and 8th grade has the highest amount of hours and minutes. So just to look at that as an example, punched in all the days for the next calendar, the early release minutes, and what we end up with is in excess of 2.2 school days in hours and minutes after the calendar. This year we had an excess of 2 school days. So the impact to the amount of time that kids would be in school is essentially the same with this calendar as it was with the calendar we had this year. One of the changes that helps with that is that Glen Hills is looking at a 20-minute lunch next year as part of their schedule instead of a 30. So that obviously gives us back 10 minutes a day. And some of the other pieces are just around how holidays fall.
So this is a forward-looking calculation of hours, and it's using the block scheduling being proposed for Glen Hills.
No, because how they schedule the day doesn't matter. It's just using
The lunchtime, though, you said was,
Yeah.
is 30. Here it's 20.
Yeah, so the lunchtime would be the only difference. This doesn't have to be a block schedule. This is just start a school day to end a school day.
Okay,
but with
that's
a
how the
20
lunch
minute
should be impacted in general. Okay.
Which is already something that staff have talked about, that 30 minutes is just too long and that it's a kind of a management issue. So basically because of this, the early release time included in the 22-23 calendar would actually have very similar instructional minutes to this. Another question that was asked was how would the day look? Of course, we still have to talk about start times and busing and how that's going to look, but just based on our current hours, on an early release day, on a typical day at Glen Hills, the student day is 8:30 to 3:45, teacher day is 7:45 to 4:15. Early release day would have the student day at 8:30 to 12:45, student day, teacher day 8:15 to 4:15. So that gives collaboration and professional development for that last 3 hours. It also would provide vertical collaboration time from 1 to 3:15, where Parkway and Glen Hills staff could be learning together. which is especially important for our special education teams, our allied arts teams that never have time to collaborate and kind of like live on an island. We talked about the next slide already, some of the after-school options for families. So basically the current model, that we talked about, another model that some districts have implemented that I've been a part of in the past is to do 1 day per month. It's not only is it not as consistent, obviously, because it's that one and done where you're getting it all in 1 day and then expect to just go do it. But if you look at just time of instruction, if we did 1 day a month, students would actually lose more because they would be out for a full school day, which is 7 hours versus the 6 hours, and they have no instruction on those days. Where in the early release days, we can still make sure that they get their core academics of literacy and math so that it doesn't affect those minutes. We just looked at some of the districts. I don't know, Jenica, if you want to share some of the districts that are currently doing an early release. We talked about, oh, sorry, that's okay. I put her on the spot.
Menominee Falls, Elmbrook,
Shorewood, Kettle Moraine.
but they all do various amounts of time weekly, right? Right. Weekly, 1 hour to 2 hours weekly.
Right.
In those districts.
Yep, Racine, Oshkosh.
Shorewood. Oh, yeah. Sorry, so there were a couple staff that couldn't make it tonight, but we did a survey and so they were.
And I'm not.
Sorry, it was me. Get out, get out, get out.
That's what I
All right, so we should be able to hear the words last time.
Did you need to go?
Hi, Holly, how are you?
Hi, good. How are you?
Good. Thanks for your patience.
Yeah, no problem. I tried to turn on my video so you could see me, but I am unallowed. So you just have to hear my wonderful voice. So I just wanted to take this opportunity to speak a little bit about how the asynchronous time that we had last year really benefited my instructional practice and students, particularly as it relates to the articulated courses. For those of you that don't know me, Holly Skelton, I teach 8th grade Spanish. So I am the second half of Spanish 1 articulation going into Nicolay. And one of the big things that we already know, particularly with the sub shortage right now, is that our current prep and planning time is often spent assisting in the hallways, covering classes, calling adults and caregivers and stuff like that, working with students to diffuse situations. And, all of that is critical to make the day run smoothly. But what it does on the back end is reduce the amount of time that we have to differentiate our instructional activities. It really limits our ability to provide meaningful feedback on student work as well. So just to kind of compare, so last year with that asynchronous Friday, meeting with students with small groups in the morning and then having that couple hours of time in the afternoon, I was actually able to read an entire novel in Spanish online with my students. And it was simply because I had that time set aside that I could plan that and differentiate that. We did a book club, so I actually read 2 different books with 2 different groups of kids, but having that time was so critical to planning and implementing that. And if I wouldn't have had those couple hours every week, it really did make a big difference. Another thing that I really would look forward to in that time is co-planning with other grade levels and with allied arts. We don't have common planning times with those areas, and For me especially, world language is so much more than the words that are spoken between the walls of my classroom, and being able to let my students see that there is Spanish in art, and there is Spanish in music, and there is Spanish in physical education. Like, making those connections would be so cool for those kids. It's just really hard because I don't see the allied arts teachers on a regular basis. So that's difficult, and an opportunity that I would really embrace, just having that time to work with them. Another thing is that I really have had to pare back on the feedback I give students. And it's, again, not because I don't want to give them meaningful feedback. I don't have the time. I don't have the time in the day. And I could contribute to the academic growth of my students so much more even if I was able to leave 2 sentences on an assignment. Those sentences matter to these kids, and I want to be able to provide them with that feedback so that they have an opportunity to look at where they can really focus their growth in a specific area of need, rather than only giving them like general feedback, like, hey, this looks great. Like, really being able to pinpoint something that they can work on, which then in turn would allow me sufficient planning time to group students up based on their needs and really differentiate what my lessons are and tailor to each need of the groups, set up group lessons, set up rotations, and that type of stuff. I just thought it was really important that you guys heard from me, especially because I'm the last stop shop before the kids move on to high school world language, and being able to provide them with the meaningful opportunities in and outside of the classroom is so important to me. And I really wanted you to know how much that asynchronous time last year contributed to my ability to help my students be successful.
Thanks, Holly.
Hello. Am I unmuted?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Hi. Most of you probably don't know me. I'm new. I'm the 4th grade teacher, and just speaking on having that collaborative time. Kind of what I think it was either Allison or Anna was saying, that a lot of our time during our prep periods are spent with students who need to process things during the day, or touching back with students on things that happen during the day. And while that's obviously very beneficial, we can't use that to have our common plan time. And I think it would be very beneficial for us to be able to also collaborate with the SPED team, not only in our own grade level, but also kind of more of a vertical as well, kind of looking to see where we can go with our students, where they need to go, and having that common plan time and making sure that everyone is able to be there and everyone is able to focus on that PD and working together, and not being kind of sidetracked with, I need to check in with this student, I need to call this parent, things like that, where we can really focus on that. And so hopefully, if we can improve that in the classroom, then we might have less things that we need to work out with students, because it'll already be a little bit smoother within our day. So we love being able to have time to work together. And I think that when we do get that time, we really are able to do a lot and accomplish a lot. So it's extremely beneficial for all students, especially being in such a school where there are so many different opportunities for students as far as outside of the math and ELA, which I'm from Illinois, so I am just kind of getting all this, and it's so awesome, and all the opportunities they have. And so I think it's part of our duty as teachers and as staff to be able to utilize all of those opportunities to the best of our ability. And I think having that common time, having that consistent plan time. Okay, I know that every other week I'm going to have a set of hours that I'm going to be able to bring up this, this, and this. I know I'm going to be able to work out this problem and ask for some help from maybe someone who is teaching up in a higher grade, or someone who had taught in, this in the past, or something like that. So we've talked about it a lot in our team, and we find any sort of common plan time extremely valuable, and would love to be able to have it on a consistent basis.
Thank you, Kelly. And you've sat here all night long. Thank you so much for staying.
So I'm Michelle Prince. I'm a math coach and interventionist this year. I'm a brand new position in the building, and I meet with teams to help with math instruction, to help build practices and help people to navigate the curriculum effectively and develop practices. And it's been a little bit difficult this year in that we have the half-hour ELA math content meeting times before school, which is 7:45 to 8:15, which isn't really 30 minutes, even though you do the math it is, but people-wise it's not. And then I meet with the teams once a week to check in and see how we're going, except that one staff member is pulled to cover a class during the planning time, or another staff member is pulled to cover another class. And then I also had a vision of meeting with special educators because they don't get as much content specific learning, and so I wanted to beef that up. Well, they are supporting students on their caseload all day long, not just during math and language arts. They go down to gym and they go all those other places. And so that would help me to be able to help with the job that I was really enjoying, to be able to be better at it. The other thing is that, like Kelly had said, being able to get not just talking to fourth grade teachers in isolation, fifth grade teachers in isolation, but getting them all together to work on common elementary math learning, and then our middle school teachers all together at the same time to talk about things together with the powerful.
Thanks.
Yes. Anyone have any comments or want to make a motion one way or the other?
Yeah, so my thing is that there's nothing really specific written down about what this time is going to be used for. So I hear all these great ideas of how to use this time, but for all I know, someone could use it for something else. So for example, instead of teachers having this collaboration time, where some of them are even talking about having prep time, and that, I love prep time myself. I'm a teacher, right? But for all I know, it could suddenly turn into administrative meetings. So I guess my issue is with the early release, there's nothing really specific laid out as to what that time is going to be designated for.
So I just don't think we can do that until we have our strategic plan. So the next step in the strategic planning process is to bring all that information to you, the board, for the board to decide, here are our priorities. And then once we know what those priorities are, then we start building what staff learning aligns to those priorities. And it's our job as building staff to schedule that time and have certain things in place to hold staff accountable. So if it's a PLC data meeting, there are ways for them to track their meetings, track their minutes, track what they're talking about, track what the work's going to be. But that's on us to make sure that it's not wasted time and that it's used with fidelity.
Yeah.
But you would have a more specific plan before it would start. I just can't, I can't decide for teachers, administrators, and the whole public that did a strategic plan exactly what that's going to look like right now.
Right, but
Which
that's
is
what
why
I'm
I
saying,
just
even
gave
if they were
options.
broadly, this is teacher collaboration time, and we're not going to touch it.
So it
You know,
would be a
that-
combination. It'd be a combination of collaboration, which means you're looking at student data, you're talking about how your students are progressing,
Or
and then
prepping.
it'd be professional development. So it'd be a combination of those two main things.
Because
But then you've been an educator, you know that they can put things in place to show the minutes from the meeting. they'll have administrators visiting their teams, they're gonna be working. I
Yeah.
mean, I think to say that the teachers are not gonna use this.
No, I'm not saying that
I
at all.
mean, because I know that we barely get to team, and we function as a PLC, and that's exactly what we do.
Yeah.
And when you say prep work, there probably is prep work on our part, where we're looking at models, and we're looking at units, and we're deciding, how can we differentiate this, how can we scaffold this, who
Yeah.
needs SDI, so they're not gonna be grading their papers.
Oh, no,
I hear everyone saying how much they need this time.
Yeah, no, I think you're misunderstanding what I'm saying. I mean, if teachers need a grade during that time, they should be able to grade. What I'm scared of is it turning into like district meetings, things like that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's
saying
grading
No.
time.
Okay.
I mean, maybe occasionally as a mental health day, you know, the reason teachers want it so much because the time before school and after school is meetings with principals.
Yeah.
And it's district meeting time.
And then I'm also curious why they're losing their prep time so much.
So, I mean, they're just, every single day they're covering.
I mean, I'm sure there are whole days where teachers don't even have a time for themselves, if they're in one class or another, covering something. Yeah.
And even when you do have the planning time, I mean, you know, Ben, by the time, well, actually, no, it's different at high school. Never mind. I was gonna say, for a lot of the teachers, though, by the time you walk them to their classroom, get them settled in for art and get back to your room, you've got like 20 minutes.
Right.
You're not gonna pull a whole team together, pull out rubrics and writing sources and dig in. You just don't have time to dig in.
No, but like I forget who she was saying, you know, she's having trouble grading because she doesn't have enough prep time. And so to me, that's a concern because teachers need their prep time.
It's a sub shortage.
So
It's a
if, like I'm
serious
saying,
concern.
if this, you know, late or early releasing, there was a designated time for prep time, I'd be all for that. I'm just nervous that it's gonna turn into meetings that aren't really useful to teachers.
So I don't know what to say to tell you that it won't, but it won't. It's about professional learning and using data, and it's about instruction.
Are the teachers trained in PLCs here? Have they gone through the process? So that's part of the strategic plan, that's the route you, okay. I can just see to the board and then I'll stop talking, is that this, working in a PLC and that's professional learning community, it's different for different people, but as a teacher, it is so important to meet with your colleagues. And it's not just about, it's about meeting student needs, it's about looking at their data and how they're doing on assessments, formative and summative assessments to make sure they're meeting the goals that they are. And when students aren't, teachers use that time to figure out how they can change their units and their lessons so that they can meet the needs of their kids. And I, as a special educator on a team like this, find it so valuable. And we get to meet once a week, although we have more common time to meet, but I can see why it is so difficult in this setting for teachers not to be able to meet because their schedule just isn't set up that way like it is at high school.
How long do you meet for when you meet every week?
Well, we teach in a block, so we meet for, I would say, at least 90 minutes a week. And that's a week, you know, and that's just looking at student data though. The planning is after that.
I move to approve the 2020-2023 staff calendar. Because that's what this is, basically.
Do we have, imagine, no
Yeah.
hands?
I have a motion on the floor.
Oh, you do, sorry.
I do, sorry.
Just, well, hold on, there's a motion on the
procedure
floor, so
here.
at least there has to be, take care of this motion first.
I'll tell you what my concerns are.
Wait, does someone need to
Andy.
second it or what?
Oh,
We need
yeah.
it's a motion, I made a motion, we either need a second or nothing, I mean, just procedural.
So Jen,
And then you
I'll
can go
second
back
it.
into discussion.
Okay. So I think that, you know, my concerns are that, a couple, first of all, though, I want to make sure it's absolutely abundantly clear. This is, in general, it's a great idea. We should be doing this. We should have greater professional development. We need to be emphasizing and having more effective professional development for our teaching staff, not because we're worried about them, but because this is part of what a commitment to district should be. It should be robust, it should be vibrant. My concern is the amount of time dedicated to it and the resulting impact to families. I talked a lot to people who there's a lot of emails that we got, and I didn't recognize any names from people that don't normally just, come to meetings, who had a lot of concerns about what the impact would be. And I think that some of the concerns that they have are, we just got back into the building, and now we're gonna have more time outside the building. I think people are a little bit antsy about that. I think that the options are a problem, because I don't know if there's gonna be busing or what, or how that's gonna work, but that's an expense. It's an expense to have them go somewhere else to do another activity that they would otherwise be learning in class. I think that there are impacts to scheduling, and I think that there's impacts to kids just not being in the classroom, and that's a trade-off, and you're very clear about that. So I want to say yes on this, but where I'm caught is, I just feel like I feel like there's a lot of pieces here that are in motion. What that strategic vision is going to look like and how that impacts things. How the block schedule, if we go that way, it's going to impact this. I'm worried about 20-minute lunch, because if we're going to have 70-minute classes, a 20-minute lunch is going to not be a lot. I just feel like there's a lot of impact that's up in the air, and
So I would say that there's a high probability moving forward with the block schedule. We're going to have a strategic plan. We're going to have professional development needs. This is about providing the time or not providing the time to do the work. The work is still gonna be there, just isn't gonna get done well.
And I guess my question is, why do we have to be committed to the time today, which is February? Now,
Because families need to know. I mean, you gotta talk about family planning. I got an email 2 weeks ago from Racine Unified, where my kids go, that said in 2 weeks, we're implementing every other day early releases because of all the reasons that I've talked about, and I had 2 weeks to plan. So out of respect for the fact that it could be more challenging for some families, I think we need to let them know. And because then we have to start creating a professional development plan, which is a lot of work. So we need to know if we have, what time we have to create that plan.
and I guess, another thing, nights and weekends, I mean, I'm not saying let's have them, stay here until 8 o'clock at night, X number of nights a week, or come in on a Saturday or Sunday and do something. But I just feel like there are some other avenues that are explored. And I'm not saying it has to be all one thing, by the way.
It's part of
But they're under
contract.
contract. I mean, they have a contract.
Yeah, but not for next year. Yeah.
They have a contract today. You can't just extend their contract today.
So I understand what you're saying, and we can incentivize it too. So, I mean, I feel like there's some room here for give and take that maybe haven't been explored. So I'm really grappling with it, because I guess in my mind, there are two things that I would love to see that I think I could get on board with. And right now, one is to maybe, I don't want to call it conditional, or something subject to it, but I mean, to maybe do this in 2-part, commit to having something subject to final, approval of what that schedule is. That might be one way to do it. Another way might be to, have fewer early release days. Let me show you when I look at the calendar, right? So for September, we have 2 early release days, 2 days off. November.
2 of those are holidays.
Yeah, I know. November, we have 3 early release days, and then 4 days off. Yes, it's Thanksgiving. December, we have another 2 early release days, and they're with the holidays.
One of the November ones is conferences.
I guess I would like
6
to be
hours
able
a
to.
month. What we're asking for.
I guess I would love to be able to kind of approve an asterisk or do something, but make it subject to, I guess, filling in the blanks, so that we can at least kind of revisit this when we know more details. And I guess that's the part that I'm struggling. I don't. And if anyone has ideas, Tamika, I'm all ears.
We have to start making decisions on this board. Here's the problem. She has to either, if we say no, it's fine, it's no, then it's no. But then she can go and plan with a no. If we say yes, then she can go and plan with a yes. But we cannot keep pushing decisions off, because she's either gonna take our no, and that's fine, and she's gonna have to live with it. Or she's gonna take our yes, and she's gonna have to live with that, and she can work. But we cannot keep pushing stuff off.
And I guess the other thing, to your point, Andy, is we have to trust the professional. Out of all the people in this room, Allison is trained in professional learning communities and strategic planning. So for you to say, we need a plan, you have to trust her that she's gonna come with a plan. I trust Allison that she's going to come with a plan. I trust our superintendent that she's asking for this time. Jenica's asking for this time because they know how important it is for our students and to leverage high levels of achievement. And the only way they can get that is through this early release.
But
We
it
have
also
to give a
costs-
little bit of trust to
And
her.
one other thing, the only thing that all of us have bring assets to this board. All of us bring it. Sometimes we are talking about legal questions, so we ask the two lawyers. Sometimes they're talking about something that I am an expert, which was, I don't know what it is, but then we have two teachers here too. We have a whole collaboration of people that actually are part of this and know what it's like to be in that situation. I just feel like I'm going with whatever, because they live this life. And he's taught here and they've lived this life, so I feel like
I'm not sure
they
they're on
would
the
know.
same page though.
No, I'm just saying whatever
No,
they
we are, we
say.
just had a side
yeah.
conversation, we're good.
But no, I'm just
No,
saying,
I
it's
don't
still whatever, we need to make a decision. So even if it's a vote, let's just.
Can I say this? I
Oh,
think
I
that
know,
there,
you can
so,
say whatever, I just.
so I think
not
it's
just
that,
me saying it.
what I'm struggling with is I support the plan for more time for teachers. I do support that. And what I've been hearing after listening to teachers' feedback is that what I'm hearing overwhelmingly is teachers desire time for prep time and collaboration, more so than I'm hearing the cry for PD. And I do think maybe that will come when our strategic plan is finalized and we can try to get buy-in in that area and we have a plan. Can I just let this keep going? But I don't know if we have that buy-in. And what I hear overwhelmingly is teachers want time. And I get that. But there's also this huge impact to families that's going to occur with this sort of unpredictable 3 hours every other week, sometimes 2 weeks in a row. And I think there are other options that could be explored that I would be more amenable to, like an hour weekly or things that other districts are doing. It's not just 1 day a month. That's not the only option. Other districts are doing different things. And I feel like that, and somehow we went from the weekly 2 hours in this direction to lessen the impact, but I feel like it may have increased the impact that families are seeing in their need for childcare and scheduling. And so I have to weigh the benefits to the teachers against this potential inconvenience to families. And some families, I love that you guys looked into those options and that we could provide free to low cost options. That's amazing. I think that not all families will feel comfortable utilizing those options. And so in consideration of those families, this is going to be a big inconvenience. And so I am not against the more time for teachers. It's just this particular plan, I'm not sure that I can support it in the way that it is.
Arguments they did 5
But
years.
I'm just giving my reason. That's all I want to say.
I understand
don't
that,
need
but
to
I'm
make
just
it
telling
respond to
Yeah,
okay, so she
So the
can
piece
respond, but
about
no one else
planning
can
time.
respond to her. It's
So
I just wanted to say that.
I just wanted to talk about the piece about planning time. So the reason they mention that is because all of their time right now before school or after school is used to try to shove in some professional development.
Yeah.
So they don't have that time right now.
Right.
So if we have a consistent professional development time, then that other time now becomes before and after school, they get back for planning. Because we're not trying to like do PD during these limited 30 minutes before and after school.
But the PD that you showed that we were doing was extended on the 19 hours of PD.
Right,
we were
but so
getting
if Anna is talking about social emotional needs in her building, and then we have to get a behavior committee together, and we have to talk about interventions. She has no other time to schedule those meetings except for during those times in the morning. So that learning can transfer to the consistent time and give them back their planning time. That was all I want to say. Sorry,
Okay,
Tamika.
go ahead.
Is there a way that we could block off the first, let's say, trimester and commit to reserving the other time, but to commit to, let's say, either a semester or a trimester as a pilot program? Just, to say, hey, we're gonna see how this works.
But that's worse on the timing of parents. If the
That's why
argument
they're
is
planning.
the planning, then that's even worse for parents.
Okay, so I think, so Molly and I are on the same page in the sense that we trust teachers to make correct professional decisions. I just want the one thing I want is this to be labeled something. So if we can like maybe call it teacher collaboration time, then I would feel okay about this. But I don't want it, again, I've said this already, I don't want it to turn into meetings where teachers are, you know, sitting in front of administrators. I want it, you know, organic. I want, you know, the math teachers to be able to work together, you know, things like that, right?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask Jennifer if she wanted to speak to that.
Yeah, I think it would be a rotation between PLCs, okay, professional learning communities, collaboration of team members.
But what I'm saying is like, I don't want it to say, well, okay, today you have, the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade team has to meet today. The 6th, 7th, and 8th grade math teachers have to meet today.
But that's what they want.
I kind of want it, you know, because like sometimes I need to collaborate with other algebra teacher. Sometimes I need to collaborate with the stats teacher because she used to teach my pre-calc class. So but no one's telling me who to meet with. I'm making that decision
So
myself.
part of it would be a PLC time, and then you have 3 hours, right? So you normally wouldn't meet necessarily in a PLC for 3 hours.
Right.
So if you have part of that time, and then there would be optional time to pull in some of that vertical planning time, or it would be meet with others time.
Yeah.
And I'm not gonna put specific hours on it. And then another piece would be that PD piece. So we
And
have
so-
coaches in the district who could go in and do some of that coaching. But it would have to be based on needs too, right? And what
Yeah.
teachers need. Right now, what we do is a lot of surveying, and if, you
Right.
know, I would like to get more information on this. Can you
But-
come in and do that with the
No one needs to survey me on whether or not I need help with pre-calc or not. So like,
But that's what the survey would be. So
Yeah.
we would survey you and you would say,
So
here are the
there's more than
areas
one
that I'd like
person.
more support in.
Yeah.
But would it be pre-calc?
Yeah,
Right.
there's
Like,
some,
we need to
grade
ask
level-
you.
Grade level teams, so
Yeah.
there's usually some trends that happen there.
Is there a way that the teams within themselves can figure out what they need? Like if if you're teaching 4th grade or 5th grade or whatever it is, and they know that they need to collaborate, they collaborate. If they all realize that they need prep time to do something, then it's their prep time to do something.
so if like, is there a way, like we could get this like written down, like, or because right now it's just early release
Right,
and
and
it's
there's
kind of nebulous.
I was gonna say, there's definitely work that needs to be had around it, because on one side I'm hearing, make sure that they don't abuse the time.
No,
So we
I-
want it tight, but then on the other
I-
side, it's give them some choice to do what they wanna
I
do.
don't think
Who's
anybody
saying-
said,
who
I
said
don't think
abuse the
anybody
time?
said, yeah. I
Well,
don't
when
think
you said
that.
earlier that you were, who's gonna make sure that they're using the time the way that it needs to be held?
I
So
don't think I
yes,
said
there would
that.
be a plan.
No, he didn't.
There
I
would be a
didn't.
plan.
I don't think I said that.
I might have misheard you. I thought that's what you said.
You kind of did.
No, I
So,
think I was saying
So yes,
something
there'd be a
about how how is it that, this time is designated, or how are we going to designate this time? Because I think teachers can work together and that's fine, but if it turns into administrative thing, where it's administrative meetings instead of teacher meetings, that becomes a problem.
So if we're talking about a PLC process, there's gonna be some learning on how to function as a PLC, and then a gradual release
Yeah.
for teams to just do that work on their own.
So, and I just want to make it clear, I didn't use the word abuse, and I don't think teachers abuse their time.
And I'm sorry if I said it wrong.
I just want to clarify, again, it's not a question of doubting your professional judgment, it's a question of scheduling and time, and that's what's on my mind.
So I'm just gonna throw out there that there are lots and lots and lots of districts that do it this way, for a reason.
Does anybody do the 3 hours every other week?
No idea.
So, I mean, I agree, I think that's what I'm
There's
saying,
some
there are
that
other
once a month,
options
Twice
that,
a month, 3 times a month.
right,
But
there are
if the
various
other-
options. That's
So what I hear you saying though is you're weighing the impact on families versus the benefits for staff. All the other options will have an impact on families.
Yeah, but could it be a lesser impact while still having a positive
I
impact
don't
for
know.
staff?
First
But
of
that's
all,
what
it's
we're
not
asking
about-
to
This isn't about
explore.
staff.
How
This
do
isn't
we do
about
that?
staff.
Oh,
We
yeah.
keep talking about this. This is about students. This is, the staff are just kind of the facilitators of the process. This is not about teachers. This is about advancing student achievement. This is about students. This is not about staff. It's a really big difference. And I get that people don't like, but this is about students. They're talking about kids, not about themselves or working on other things.
I
I firmly believe in the thesis of the problem and that it needs to be addressed. And I do believe that increasing professional development, time for prep and collaboration will have a positive impact on our students. I'm not disagreeing with that in any way, shape, or form.
So can we make a motion where?
When does the visitor participation?
Well, wait, before we do that though, would you be making a friendly motion to mentally or say?
Well, I'm asking a kind of a question. I don't know. Actually, I'm not making a motion. I'm asking a question about making a motion.
There was a motion and a second.
But can I have a question about making a motion? Can you make a motion where you would add on that this is teacher collaboration?
So that is
time?
an amendment?
Yeah, you can make a friendly amendment if it's
Just say
accepted
you want to be
and second it.
Oh, okay.
Such a big term with that.
That's true. That's true.
I don't know if that gets at what you're trying to get at.
Oh.
I think, Ben, we could give you a calendar at some point. Like, we could literally map it out for you. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, what those days would look like.
Well,
Once
I
we know
don't.
what the PD plan looks like.
I don't need to know like exactly what it looks like. I just want to make sure we keep it
Right.
to just teacher
So it's
time.
sacred, right. But
That's a
I'm
good
wondering
word
if
for
the calendar
sacred,
would help,
yes.
you
Sacred
know what I
teacher
mean?
time.
See that, like, hey, we're dedicated to that.
Yes.
So throw it on the calendar.
Sacred time.
Okay, I saw one hand up first, so if you just stand up, speak really loudly and state your name and your address, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, my name is Sam Purdy. I'm at 5801 North Bel Air Drive, and I have 2 kids who attend Parkway. The early release change is a big ask for families, and it would be very disruptive for my family. Just as the asynchronous days are. This is especially true considering that I have a child with complex special needs that would not be welcomed in any of these other programs listed explicitly, as we've contacted some of them in the past. One change that would make this plan more manageable would be committing to the weeks of the month that those early release days would happen. And if it could not fall on those weeks, instead of rescheduling on those months, you would go down to once a month early release. And that would prevent some of that bunching around holidays and other things. So overall, it's hard for our family to really get behind this plan without a clear path forward. Listening to other changes made by other districts, they would say exactly what that strategic plan would be first. It is hard now to really evaluate whether this early release time would be more beneficial to children than face-to-face time with their teacher. As we listened to what the teacher said, while we said, oh, it wouldn't be for prep time, a lot of teachers are advocating for prep materials because they do not have that time in their day. And so we are now saying, so let's send kids home early, more often, to make up for the fact that kids or their teachers cannot have the time in the day that we would expect. Lots of districts do early release. Lots of districts do not, and they find better ways to provide that time for teachers to meet throughout that school day. The presentation and what we've heard is that we will have the strategic plan in the future, and goals will be made then, but we are still waiting on findings from our educational consultants and our audit, and waiting to have what these strategic plans will be. Teachers are advocating for prep and planning, but a lot of the topics listed are really, we are going to be prescribing what teachers are doing. That's a conflict we're hearing here. And as a parent, I would want to know, what is teacher-led time and what is district-led time? And while as an educator, I love educator-led time, as a parent, I also want to know what the district is expecting from that time. Overall, we always want to make a decision right away, but I would want to see what that strategic plan would dictate. And that might be saying this early release needs to wait a year. I think a component that also needs to be discussed is how can ESSER funds be used now to give teachers back that planning and prep time in their day. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure.
Hi, Justin Rodriguez, 5742 North Sunset Lane. Earlier tonight, we saw that at Glen Hills, we have a 90-hour gap in math and English time, classroom instruction. And one thing that I brought up at committee meeting was, how does our in-classroom time compare to those feeder districts? I don't believe we still know that answer yet. And so I think what we need to do is compare those items, see how we compare to those other districts, and make sure that we are at least on par, since we have the most significant challenges compared to those districts, in order to make sure that our children are ready when they enter into Nicolet. In addition, I do think that this is a significant challenge for families as well in terms of planning. I did hear a lot of benefits for staff about the asynchronous days and how those days allowed more time for preparation and planning. Those days were very difficult for families in order to not only just have childcare, but also to make sure that they're covering those materials that they were expected to learn during that period of time. Other options that should be considered is that if we look at this block of time for early release, is to basically split it in half. And if you want to do half the days early release, the other half should be extended days. Half of the burden should fall on staff, half on parents, in terms of being able to provide that professional development time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone else back here? Okay, then, I'm gonna do a vote, and we're gonna do roll call vote, so please signify by saying aye when I call your name. Tamika Vukovic.
Aye.
Molly Krychowiak.
Aye.
Ben Wynn. No. I'm sorry? No. Aye?
No.
Oh, no, I can't hear you. Danielle Bailey?
No.
Andrew Franklin votes no. I take that back. Well, I really want to change that to an abstain. But regardless, motion fails. I guess my only comment on that is I really think we have to go back and, I mean, we can still consider it today, another motion, to have perhaps once a month or 3 times. I don't want to walk away from this without having a next step.
I don't think this means you have to walk away. Would you walk away from this idea with a no vote today? Or would you look at other potential options? I mean, a lot of things have been discussed.
For the reasons given, I don't know what other potential options there are. So you want staff to come in after school or on weekends, or figure out how to do it during the day? I'm just wondering what other options there are. I didn't hear.
I'm just asking if you would explore other options or not, because that's what Andy's getting at, that you think this item dies if it dies today.
So I'm asking what other options there are.
Once a month, once every 3 weeks.
I mean, our visitor participators had options that they suggested as well that were.
Which some other families would probably be upset about. I mean,
someone's always going to be upset,
Exactly.
and that's not what's motivating.
I kind of-
Okay.
I
Anyway,
kind of feel
can
like.
you finalize your vote then, Andy?
Okay,
No or abstain,
so
whatever
there were
it is.
2 ayes, there were 2 nays, there was 1 abstain, so the motion fails.
Okay, so let's move on then.
Yes. Well, can
Nope.
we make an amendment?
No.
Yeah, well, you can make a new motion,
We'll make it, there's
or you
something
can
that
make a
you want
motion
to
to
happen.
reconsider if you want to. You can change your vote.
There's
well.
no reconsider, because there's no winning. If you would have voted, there would have been a person that is on the winning side would have had a reconsideration. But since there's no winning side and it died, I don't think there's a such thing as a reconsideration. Because it has to be the winning
And
side.
any one of us 3 can make a motion to
I don't think we should be the ones reconsidering or reconfiguring the plan. We would leave that to the folks who.
It's
this
not
is
the
what they do.
that part is, he's not talking about that reconsideration.
Okay.
Well, I just, again, like my whole thing is I just want to see it's teacher collaboration time, because right now it's nebulous, so that's what I would want to put in.
I mean, if your motion is to approve this with teacher collaboration time as the title, I mean, I'll accept the motion if someone wants to second it.
What is that?
But, so.
If my understanding is correct, it's that you're not wanting to give a plan for the time yet. We have a general idea of various uses that would be beneficial. But until strategic planning is finalized, until some of these other pieces fall into place, they're not going to say, this is how the time is going to be used exactly. That will come later. So to approve this plan, you must accept that there will not be a concrete
I would say on the
understanding of
flip
what the concrete way that this time is going to be used. That's
But
not known
talking,
at this time.
talking to Ben's concern, I can guarantee that it's not gonna be administrators calling meetings during their time, which is what I think his concern is. I
That's
just
one of the
can't
main concerns.
guarantee
Yeah.
the exact way that's gonna happen.
I mean, Ben, unless you're, gonna change your vote, then move on. Okay. Okay, next item is 4B, approval of special education director.
So I attached a draft job posting. When I started in the district, the current special ed director position was cut. DPI requires that we have somebody with a type 80 special education administrative license. Since I had the license, we had discussion around me taking the role until we could figure out organizational structure. At this point, we've determined that we could support that position with a 0.6 director position. Originally, we were going to share with Mapledale Indian Hill, but they went a different route, so we're looking to post for a 0.6.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion?
I just would prefer that you're going at a 0.6, but I think because talking to other people, we found that they don't think you're gonna be able to get a 0.6. So I would rather go ahead and say up to full time, and let you do what you have to do for the work, and because from what I understand,
Post it with a range.
right, but from what I understand, and especially from some of the other, it's hard to get that 0.6 person. And we don't have a strategic plan either, and we haven't gotten that part back. And it might say we need a full-time person, so I just want to broaden that up in case that comes back and says we need a full-time person, and you don't have to come back to us. Because that is a recommendation to have a full-time person here, or is it 0.6? I think we should vary it a little. So I would ask for an amendment to go from 0.6 to a full-time.
Is there a second? Or, I guess, first off, is who made the motion? So,
Made a motion, so you can accept it as a friendly.
I
amendment.
accept it as a friendly.
is there a second on there?
Second.
Okay. So now, you want a 0.6, but the motion is to make it a full-time.
No,
I think
no.
what Tamika's saying is if we post it as a 0.6 and we don't get a bunch of candidates, then we have the flexibility to repost it as full-time, so that without coming back to the board. Did I get that right?
yes, it's just flexibility here, because you may not get the part-time person.
Okay.
And more so that that plan comes back and says, no, you need more than a 0.6, you need a full-time person.
Right.
Because we have not gotten that back yet.
Okay. I understand. Then, with that said, is there any further discussion? On a voice vote, all in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Number 5, consent agenda, approval of financials, approval of minutes. Second, anyone?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Okay, visitor participation, 6A. I'll give us a motion for people who raise their hand. Please come up and speak up, okay?
So right there, but very loud.
Good evening. My name is Persephone Purdy. I live at 5801 North Bel Air Drive. I like the Parkway Library website. I like the Parkway Library website. I think it should be closer to the front page so kids like me can reach it without our teacher's help. I also think there should be a page on the website where you can learn subjects at home. Thank you for having me today.
Oh my gosh, thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else?
Yeah.
Mr. Warner,
Yeah,
please.
Yeah, Jordan Warner, 800 West Clovernook Lane. I emailed with Kayla earlier, just inquiring about the special education staff, paraprofessional thing, and the number of students that have IEPs and 504s. What I've noticed substituting at Parkway, at least, I don't know what it's like up here, but they always seem to be continually short-staffed with especially paraprofessionals. So I'm just wondering, is there a ratio of what's required as far as students with either IEPs, 504s, or with just emotional behavioral issues? Because it becomes a very distracting thing when you're teaching and you're spending 20% of your time just trying to manage the room.
Yeah, there's a formula that DPI uses so that it's not straight numbers, as you know, right? You could have 4 kids in a room that are much more work than a different 10 kids in a different room.
Yeah.
So they actually have a formula, and Dr. Rodriguez uses that and just kind of calculates everything out. And then we met as a team before school started, and she gave recommendations for staffing based on that formula. As you know, this year's it's been a challenge with staffing, but we'll continue to use that formula and look at how we could possibly realign some class placement or some staff just to alleviate some of what you're talking about. And hopefully we're able to hire some really high quality people, moving into next year. But yeah, the formula just takes into account like their actual disability as well as, so that it's not just numbers, because you could have 10 speech only kids, right? Versus, yeah, so it calculates it out. Dr. Rodriguez goes through that process for us.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Is there anyone else? Anyone else online? Okay, I'm gonna close visitor participation. Item 7A, motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Thank you for all, motion carries. Thank you.